So, Berto, I thought we'd just kick back and read some patron emails and respond. What do you say, Berto?
Let's do it.
This is the Psychology in Seattle podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm a therapist, and I'm also a professor.
My name is Berto Questions, and I sell air-filled vacuum tubes.
So this first email is from anonymous patron. She writes, I was wondering if you could talk about the romanticization of abuse in media. I wanted to ask this because I'm a fan of and have kind of been following the internet discourse surrounding killing stalking, which is a psychological horror comic and centers around an abusive relationship between two men. It's called Killing Stalking. When the story first came out, I saw a lot of people shipping. Yeah. I saw a lot of people shipping the two guys together despite the abusive nature of their relationship. And now I've been seeing a lot of young girls on TikTok who acknowledge that the character Sangwoo is abusive and a murderer, but they still want to date him. I'd love to hear Umberto's views on this as well. Why is this the case, Berto?
First of all, there are a few terms in the world that I dislike more than the shipping term. I hate it with a passion. And I can't tell if it's just because I first heard it in relationship to stupid Raylo, Ray and
Kylo Ren.
Ray and Kylo. But in I hate that short shipping. But anyways, that aside, actually, it's got something in common with the whole Ray and Kylo. Like, one of the reasons I was so upset about that concept of like, yeah, they could end up together is like,
and they did,
is that Kylo Ren is a psychopath mass murderer, and abusive, and Ray is like this normal, strong, empowered female, and I'm like, why do you want to do that?
And because there's a man and a woman on screen together,
they have to end up together.
They gotta have sex.
Oh God, I hated it so much. And so, with this regard, I guess it depends. I haven't seen this, or if it's a graphic novel, read it or whatever. So there's certainly an angle that it could take that would be very interesting. What I will say is the glorification of, for example, serial killers, that there are women and men that idolize them and want to marry them and date them and stuff. I find it disturbing. I find it emboldening, and I don't like it. So emboldening because it's like, it's almost validating to those people. Like, oh, well, you see, some part of society validates me.
Yeah, and we wonder why we have a culture of mass killings where the mass killers, vast majority men, will post pictures of themselves doing it because they know, like with Elliot Rodger, or
someone will idolize them.
The Menendez brothers, or there was the one of the Boston Marathon bombers was lusted after.
Oh yeah, and I was watching that recently, the documentary about Ramirez. Ramirez, and he just had like throngs of admirers.
I mean, it's one thing to be like, that guy's cute, but I still hate him. That guy, if he wasn't a psychopathic murderer, maybe he would be.
Yeah, it's too bad he is so damaged and a danger to the whole world. Yeah. But he happens to have genetic traits that are appealing aesthetically. Yeah. End of story. Right. But that happened with Ted Bundy. It happens with all these people. It's
Charlie Manson had tons of admirers.
And so it sounds, from what you've described, that in this show there might be some glorification of that aspect.
Right.
But I don't know.
So it's hard to know, but it certainly is something that we're noticing more and more. And we've, like I said, it's always been a thing. It's just right now, TikTok is now manifesting this human tendency. As I said, in the 70s, there was known women who were lusting after and wanting to marry Charlie Manson, even though they knew he was going to be in prison the rest of his life.
Yeah.
Charlie Manson was, in the 70s, the most hated person in America. I mean, he was evil incarnate, and yet because he was, so let me get into a few factors as to maybe why this happens. And it's all just speculation because we can't open up people's brains and look at the reasons why we do anything. But one of the things that I think happens in like Kylo Ren and Rey, or in this killing, stalking horror comic, is that, we lose ourselves in these stories. When we really like a story, and I think particularly, you know, for some people like you and me, like my wife, Stacy, she'll be like, I'll say, remember that movie we saw 6 years ago? And then in this scene and that happened. And Stacy will be like, how do you remember scenes from a movie that we saw 6 years ago? Like, how do you remember that? And I think it's because I just like that kind of art, or I don't know, my brain just works that way, where movies and stories and like intense TV shows really like get under my skin. You know, I'll mull them over late at night on YouTube. Yeah. Lately, I've been watching clips from In Bruges. This McDonald,
Colin Farrell.
Yeah, Colin Farrell and I can't remember the other guy's name. But anyway, a very wonderful Irish actor. And then it led me down this road to watch clips from The Guard, which also has that guy, the other guy with Colin Farrell. And you know, once I saw In Bruges for the first time, like 12 years ago or something, every now and then I just think about that movie. I just think about these scenes from that movie. And I think that for some people, they get so engrossed in a storyline that they become real to us.
Oh, I can relate 100% with you, not necessarily about In Bruges, but I have those movies where like I've seen them ages ago and I have to rewatch them. They come back into my mind. Even some bad ones. There's some bad ones that I have this like sick fascination with. For example, there's a movie called God's Not Dead, which is essentially, it's got Kevin Sorbo plays this atheist professor that you would think this is hilarious. As a professor yourself, imagine this. At the beginning of the movie, all the students go into the philosophy class, and the professor says, okay, listen, I could waste half the semester going over arguments about, you know, is there a God, is there not a God? We're going to skip all that. I'm going to ask all of you to sign on a piece of paper and say, God's not dead. And if you don't do it, you know, you can leave the class or whatever.
So is this like a pro-God movie or something?
Yeah, definitely. It's funny.
Right. I think I remember seeing a trailer for this. Guess what it got on Rotten Tomatoes?
Like 29 or something.
12. Guess what it got from audience score? Because remember, this was marketed to Christians. Right. So I'm guessing people like you and me, I can't believe you saw it, but
yeah.
But
okay, like a 90.
Yeah, 75.
75. All right. So, but anyways, so I don't like the movie. I think the message is bad.
It's a Christian movie about an atheist professor
and other atheists who are all terrible, and terrible things happen to them as a result.
And then they learn, oh no, God is not dead,
or die in the process. literally. So,
and for those people who don't know Kevin Sorbo, he's from Hercules.
Hercules.
The TV show. Yeah.
Anyways. I don't like the movie. The movie's message is not something I'm compatible with. But for some reason, not only have I watched it multiple times, I've watched multiple YouTube videos dissecting it and analyzing the philosophy in it, analyzing a whole bunch of stuff.
Wait, is this kind of like The Room or something for you?
It's The Room is more comedic. Like you and I could sit there watch.
So, but why would you? I don't understand if it's not like The Room. Why would you watch this movie? Does it intrigue you?
No, it's like, I don't have a good answer, but it is something where it's like watching a bad car wreck or something. I'm not supposed to.
Do you watch it and go like, oh, you stupid Christians?
Well, more like you stupid creators of this movie. You know, I'm not putting all Christians down. I'm just looking at the people that made the movie and going, are you seriously doing this?
Like, you stupid, this type of Christian?
Yeah, exactly.
So, because you have a desire to hack on those types of Christians,
and that message in general, that because the kind of the meta message of the movie is like, I could use logic and reason to prove something that's not provable. You know?
A better example would be a movie that you lost yourself in that you loved.
Oh yeah, and so American Psycho, which has terrible imagery. I mean, or
Star Wars, for example.
Well, that one's
like
redeeming.
The feeling that I'm sure you and I can relate to of Han Solo and Princess Leia kissing on the carbonite, chamber floor. I believe there's a real person called Han Solo. I mean, I don't believe, but I feel like there's a person in a galaxy far, far away a long time ago named Han Solo, and this woman named Princess Leia, and they kissed, and she says, "I love you," and he said, "I know."
100%.
Like it's not just this story. It's not just this production. It's not a script. It's not a movie full of actors.
No.
Like this is something that really happened.
As a kid, I really, really felt, there was a period of time where I really felt that it was history. And part of it is because it said a long time ago, but I was like, and so when I was waiting for Return of the Jedi to come out, I remember like, well, I want to know what else happened in history. You know, like what else happened?
Right. And people will do that too. They'll be like for me, when I think about episode 9, which is just so terrible, that I consider that movie to be like a fake movie.
Yeah.
When I think about what happened in that movie, I'm like, well, that's just fan fiction.
Right.
That's just like someone writing a story about President Lincoln having sex with Teddy Roosevelt. It didn't really happen, but the other stuff did happen.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Anyway,
Kylo and Rey did not end up together in real life.
That's just that's a Reddit fan fiction shipping that was just not real. And everyone knows that horses don't run on spaceships. That's a terrible plan. And
gosh, I forgot they literally had horses on spaceships.
And also everyone understands that every one of those ships has its own navigation system, especially if they just look out the window, they can tell which way is up. And, there's just so many, and no one would devise a knife that would do that to make you stand on that one particular. It's just a ridiculous. That's a child's script. This isn't what in the Star Wars world. This would never happen.
I love how this has turned into a critique of the.
But anyway, so we lose our self-source. Number 2, we apparently as humans love to see two people fall in love. There are so many plots that involve will they, won't they. Berto, famous examples.
I mean, the whole Friends run is a will they, won't they.
Okay.
Who's the boss? Scarecrow and Mrs. King. Now, granted, those are deep cuts. But the point is, almost every 80s show had a will they, won't they.
Yeah. So let me just give some from my list that I typed out here. Luke and Lorelai from Gilmore Girls. Sarah and Mr. Big from Sex and the City. Jim and Pam from The Office. Daphne and Niles from Frasier, David and Maddie from Moonlighting. This is the original one, David and Maddie. Sam and Diane from Cheers. That's another original.
Yep.
Joey and Dawson from Dawson's Creek. Rachel and Ross from Friends. George, Michael, and Maybe from Arrested Development. They're cousins, but are they cousins? Maggie and Joel from Northern Exposure, if you remember. Marianne and the Professor from Gilligan's Island, which is not really a will they, won't they, but I don't know. And Mulder and Scully from X-Files. So
I forgot about Mulder and Scully.
We love, and these like X-Files has nothing to do with love or romance, and yet we have to insert it in there. You know what I mean?
Well, and it's so bad that if they do get together, the show is at risk of ending unless they break them up again.
Right. But we love, we love the tension. Anyway. Yeah. And maybe that's another point with shipping. We love, it feels very satisfying to us to have like star-crossed lovers, Romeo and Juliet. And also, so not only do we have lots of rom-coms and romance, will they, won't they, but we also will insert romantic storylines into almost every story we tell, like where it doesn't call for it. So do you have any famous examples of that?
Like romance inserted into odd places?
Yeah.
That's a good question. Let's see.
Sort of infamous examples where people are like, why are you inserting a love story in the middle of this?
A love story. I don't know. I'm sure you have a list.
Well, Harry Potter isn't one of these, but I will mention that compulsively rolling or rowling, however you pronounce it, everyone ended up in a relationship in the end.
A very incestuous, tight-knit relationship.
Yeah, a very convenient and sort of fan satisfying relationship. Yeah. You know what I mean? But the most infamous one that I can think of was when Peter Jackson did The Hobbit.
Oh, see, I didn't see those.
Okay, well, I'll tell you that.
Oh no!
This is an atrocious. I mean, it is. The Hobbit is a beautiful book, and Peter Jackson made it into...
You're scaring me.
He took every... Okay, so you remember Lord of the Rings, how these are, classics, but there are some scenes where you're just like, Peter Jackson, why? Like when and it was usually Legolas, like when Legolas surfed on the shield.
Like
or
where he goes from like a really good archer who can have greater endurance, really great eyesight too. He's a ninja jumping off of elephants. Yeah,
doing things that are physically extremely unlikely to happen. Where he slides down the elephant the trunk. And it's like, you're obviously just playing around with CGI.
And the other problem with those things, it happened with Gimli too, because even though he wasn't doing those crazy things, but it became to the point where like, well, we have nothing to fear. Both of these characters are indestructible.
Yeah.
Legolas it doesn't matter if you throw a billion bad guys at them.
Yeah.
They'll go and they'll each count how many billions they killed.
Right.
And it's going to be fine.
Yeah. Whereas in the book, you get a clear picture that these are just regular dwarves or elves, or these are not gods, and an arrow coming out of the wrong place at the wrong time, they're dead.
And I love that aspect of, in fact, the whole aspect of Lord of the Rings that was really surprising when I finally read it, because I didn't read it as a kid, and that I really appreciate, is how understated powers actually end up being.
Right.
They're not throwing meteor-sized fireballs from one side of the mountain to the other. And also the Legolas thing, you get the sense of like, wow, this guy's got elves, have crazy endurance, really great eyesight. They don't need much sleep. They got great immune system. Fine. But that's it. Like,
But they're not. So he took all of those, the worst of the Lord of the Rings, and just made a whole trilogy based on that.
No.
Yeah, it is just one. It starts off okay.
Wait, I saw the first one and I almost left in the middle because now I remember, it traumatized me. It felt like a Wile E. Coyote cartoon with the dwarves in the mines and stuff.
Yeah.
It was so ridiculous.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. So, but along those lines, Peter Jackson and his other writers inserted this love story between an elf woman and one of the dwarves, one of the 12 dwarves with Bilbo.
Oh boy.
And it was completely unnecessary.
Oh, no.
It's like, why? And it was badly written and played, and it was just awful. And then, of course, episode 9.
Of course. Why didn't I name that?
Yeah,
that's ridiculous.
Why would, in the middle of Star Wars, where you have Rey?
Oh my gosh.
Arguably, especially in the main movies, the first woman character who is strong and independent and cool and admirable, and of course, you have to make her kiss a guy and want to be with him, and it's just ridiculous. So, but we eat it up. They don't put those things in movies for no reason.
Yeah.
They don't put explosions in. Michael Bay isn't a billionaire for no reason,
Well, and it matches our physiology and our emotions, because if you think about, go to a random person on the street, be it a woman or a man, but let's say it's a woman in this case. Walk up to them, look at them in the eyes, and then reach out and touch their hand. Like, that's not something you do. That's a very intimate, very personal thing. And if that happens, it's such a strong feeling. Like, you've reached out and touched another human being. You've crossed this boundary. We feel it. Hence why, like, we are so, the whole idea of a wooing, of a courtship is so powerful and so attractive. And that's why when we see it on the screen, we get excited. We're like, ooh, they're wooing each. They might touch hands. They might, ooh, it's going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. Number 3, our culture, in mainstream American culture anyway, is centered around falling in love, especially young people falling in love. It is this, I'm guessing 500 years ago, people, if they came to today and just watched what we, create as entertainment that we show ourselves, they would say, why are you so obsessed with romantic and love?
I beg to differ, my friend. Shakespeare. All the Greek myths.
Well,
I think
maybe
it's been
1,000 years ago.
Yeah.
I don't know. But my point is that it's something that is particular to Western culture today. If you go to other countries, I guarantee you, there's a much different approach to romance and to what is good in life, what you're supposed to be focusing on, how much time you should be focusing on it. So it's a decision that we tell ourselves.
I wonder, like, I mean, I'm thinking like in Colombia and South America, soap operas were the biggest thing, you know, and it's all about that. Like,
yeah, I'm not saying that in other countries it's not that way, but I'm just saying that when you have a society that makes decisions and maybe has the luxury to focus on this sort of thing, because there were times in history and parts of the world today where it's arranged marriages. People don't have cute meets and fall in love. Cute meets. You get married, you have kids, you work hard, and you die, and that's what you do. And romantic love is, why are you so obsessed with it?
Yeah.
And so our culture is just mega obsessed with it. Again, particularly young people. How many rom-coms have like 63-year-olds in it? It's just like, we just have this thing about youth. And number 4 is what I'm going to call it, I knew it-ism. We love as individuals to say, I knew that was going to happen.
Oh, I knew Ray and Kylo were going to get together.
Right. And so I think shipping is kind of involved in that. It's like, because we'll see shows where two people, man and woman, are working together and they hate each other, and maybe when we're 10 we look at that and we're like, well, they hate each other, they're not going to fall in love. But then eventually they do fall in love, and as a viewer you feel like you were tricked. And so I think this translates into compulsively predicting shipping all over the place so that you didn't get blindsided and be made a fool of because you didn't predict it.
Yeah, I guess so. It's so frustrating because on the shows where it's supposed to be on purpose, it's way too obvious for it to be valuable that you predicted it. And in movies like, oh, I predicted Ray and Kylo, I'm like, well, you influenced a very bad decision on the filmmaker's part.
I know. And again, just getting back to Star Wars for a second. When those characters were invented by J.J. Abrams and crew for Episode 7, I'm pretty sure
100%
they were not planning on making them get together.
There's no way.
But because they listened to the idiots, because of what happened to Episode 8, or because of the reaction to Episode 8, they're like, let's just give every fan exactly what they want, and that will be a good movie. And it wasn't. It was just an atrocious ball of poo. And number 5 is, there's a lot of loneliness in the world, and a lot of people who don't have romance in their life, or not stable romance, and we will project that need into other people. We're hoping vicariously that other people will have it because we don't. I also think that there's a need to see Schadenfreude romance love for some people. When you have tragic romantic experiences and you feel shame about it, you're like, why am I having so many tragic romantic experiences? And then it feels good to see other people also have tragic romantic experiences. It's like, oh, I'm not alone. I'm not alone.
Right.
And what's more tragic than Ray and Kylo getting together? What's more tragic than, as you're saying, Anonymous Patron, these two characters in Killing Stalking, which is an abusive relationship? What would be more tragic than that? And so it's kind of, it involves a lot of different things that we clearly exhibit as human beings, kind of get wrapped up into this thing.
By the way, I don't know if you watch shorts like on TikTok or Facebook or whatever, but so common, so popular are these shorts where it's guys or gals going up to strangers, usually at a college, and trying to pick them up in all sorts of random weird ways. And you never see videos about if they got their number, about their first date or their second date. It's only these pickup moments.
Yeah.
And I think it's the same phenomena. It's like the awkwardness and the intrigue of like, will they, won't they, in that first encounter, right?
Yeah.
They're so popular.
No one's making TikTok videos about, like year 7.5 when you're just sitting there disillusioned with each other while each of you is arguing in your mind about what to watch on Netflix.
Right.
it's much more compelling to watch about the beginning.
Yeah.
The other thing, just along these lines, is that when two people are in a movie together, married at the beginning, a very good chance is they'll be divorced by the end.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, it's like if they're the central characters.
Story's got to change.
Yeah, you either have to go from single to married or married to single. You can't just like be married, which is, anyway. So Anonymous Patron asks, are there any long-term effects of consuming this type of media in general, especially during adolescence? Berto, what do you think?
Well, okay, definitely. I don't buy the premise that, you know, the video games or the movies are going to en masse cause terrible effects for everyone. That said, I do think it's obvious that the more we reinforce certain cultural opinions and norms in movies and media and books, the more we keep repeating those in reality. So I do think that it is a self-fulfilling prophecy, like a self-sustaining system. I'm imagining this didn't start with a movie or a book or anything. I do imagine that back in the day, there was actually some fascination with the killers in society, be it the heroes and warriors that went off to war and killed the most evil soldiers or whatever, or the gladiators, or actually maybe the murderers down the street. And then eventually that got put into media, and then that reinforced the notion. But nowadays, do I imagine that seeing constantly the same tropes over and over has some effect in our perception? Yeah, I do think so. That said, clearly it's not true that the majority of humans are lusting after serial killers. That's not true. Right. So I don't think it's that powerful.
Yeah, but I think that it's possible. So overall, I'll say to answer the question is, it's probably not having a huge negative effect. We tend to panic, about things. Young people today, and it's like, yeah, like I said, Charlie Manson was a manifestation of this in the 70s, and our society didn't crumble after the 70s. So, having said all that, might it for some normalize or legitimize abuse in relationships? I could absolutely see that happening. You have an impressionable 13-year-old mind in a community of people that's very insular and supporting a relationship type that is very coercive and abusive and harmful to one person, where there's a real submissive role. And particularly if you maybe grow up in a family where it's like that, you could imagine that this would contribute to the normalization and might not, in this, in a similar way that porn can, trick an adolescent person into thinking that sex is supposed to be a certain way.
Right.
Not that they can't unlearn that, but it could cause some negative effects. Last question. Does it lead to people being desensitized to abusive behavior, seeking out someone? I think I already asked that question. So Berto, you texted me the other day and you said, I have an idea for a discussion. I went into the office for the first time since the pandemic and my mind was blown. What happened?
Yes. Okay. Well, so when the pandemic started, I think we all got shut out of our offices around the beginning of March 2020. And since then, I had been working exclusively from my house, just dialing in like we all dial into Zoom meetings and stuff like that. Well, the other day, there was someone visiting from a different country. And so they set up a meeting in the actual office. And it was optional. I didn't have to go. But I thought...
Meaning you could have Zoomed in?
I could have called in, yeah. But I thought, well, I'll do it. But it was super stressful. It was surprisingly stressful.
Why did you decide to do it?
I thought, well, maybe it's time. Maybe this is a chance for me. I haven't been in the office in so long. I wanted to go see. There are coworkers I work with that I had never met in person.
Yeah.
So I'm like, well, let's try it out. But it was surprisingly stressful, the whole process. And in fact...
What was stressful?
Well, okay, for some reason, even though I've seen you, what am I talking about? I go to the grocery store. I go all over the place. I've seen humans plenty. But for some reason in my head, it felt as if I was going to be coming in contact with humans for the first time in 2 years or something. I also was like sort of self-conscious about in silly ways, like, well, what should I wear? I guess I'll wear what I normally
so
wear.
So for me, that's the biggest thing is what do I wear?
Yeah.
Because so let me kind of go on a jag here, because I feel like this needs to be recorded for history. That when the pandemic started, I, obviously was stuck at home all the time. And I started realizing I don't really need to wear jeans anymore. You know, I don't even leave the house. So I guess I'll just start wearing sweats. And then I started saying, well, there's something even more comfortable than sweats. There's pajamas. And so even when I would work over Zoom, I'd be wearing pajama bottoms or, sweats or something.
Right.
And all my dress shoes went to the very back of the closet, and I started only wearing certain kinds of shoes. And then I started thinking I need more comfortable shoes, because when I was working all the time and leaving the house looking presentable, my comfortable shoes were things that I would only wear just some of the time. But then all of a sudden, day after day after day, it was comfy. And so I just started buying more comfy shoes, more pajamas, more t-shirts. I didn't have a lot of t-shirts because I would dress up for work.
Yeah, you wear a shirt and stuff.
Yeah, and I found that I just wanted more variety in my life. I didn't want to wear the same 2 or 3 t-shirts the whole week, so I started buying more t-shirts. Then so I'm fully kind of into that lifestyle. Then when the pandemic was starting to lighten up and I start leaving the house, I started going like, well, but I really like wearing pajama bottoms. And so I started figuring out, how am I going to wear nicer pajama bottoms outside? And I would ask my wife, I'd be like, do these look like pajama bottoms or do they look like yoga pants? Then she'd be like, those look like pajama bottoms. And I'd be like, I don't care. People can suck it. I'm wearing pajama bottoms when I'm going to the grocery store. And so even though the pandemic was open, I was still essentially wearing, super comfy clothes in a way that I'd never worn even at home before.
Right.
Before the pandemic, I would wear jeans until I went to bed. You know what I mean? Around the house, I would just wear my work clothes because, you come home from work, I wouldn't change necessarily. And so it didn't really hit me until I started, I needed to go to work or I needed to go to a nice restaurant. And I'm like, I probably can't wear my comfy shoes and my pajamas to a nice restaurant or to work, right?
Right.
So then I'm like, where are my dress shoes? Where are my nice jeans? You know what I mean?
Right.
Where's my nice jacket? And I started pulling those out of the back of the closet. And when I put them on, it felt so uncomfortable because I was so used to not
shackles of society.
Yeah, it felt so. When the first time I put on my dress shoes, it was just a couple weeks ago. I had a hard time walking in them, even though before I would wear them all day long at work. I just wore my dress shoes all the time. So I just find that to be I wonder, and then I wonder from this point forward if I'm now permanently damaged by the pandemic regarding
it's not going to be possible for you to be comfortable, damn it.
Like I'm never going to go back to hard clothes.
Well, like when we were doing all our podcasts over the internet while we were not seeing each other, I was always naked from the belly button down.
Mm-hmm. And but you did that at my house anyway.
That's true, but then I also was doing it for work. And then I go to the Whole Foods one day and I walk in and the clerk's like, "Dude, where's your mask?" And I was like, "Oh, I left it in the car." But anyway, so I show up to work and, I work with vacuum tubes and like when you're filling them with air, like you can't be wearing crappy clothing because like little fibers get in there and stuff. So I have to think, what am I going to wear? So I'm like, well, I'll wear my nicest jeans because I don't want to go too much overboard. The culture at my workplace isn't that dressy, but it's not, you're right. Like you bought jammies. I bought tons of sweatpants. I'm not going to show up with baggy sweatpants and my like flip-flops and stuff, right? So I'm like, all right, I'll wear my nicest jeans, which felt like cardboard.
Right.
I was like, oh my God, I'm wearing cardboard.
Yeah, and it really made me rethink why fashion was like that. Like, I was like, how did I tolerate wearing, and these, and my jeans are even, they're kind of more on the comfy side anyway.
But it's outdated because we had jeans because they're durable. Because when you're kneeling in the dirt and picking up cow dung.
Well, but even like regular slacks or something, like right now I'm wearing shorts.
Yeah.
I was never one of those guys that would just wear shorts all the time, but now I don't want that restriction feeling on my legs.
Well, okay, and same thing with what do I wear on the top part of myself? Like a t-shirt. Okay, t-shirt's a little casual. So then I wore a t-shirt that wasn't too wacky, and then like a little jacket. And I'm like, okay. But it was all these little decisions. And then driving there, I almost turned around 3 times.
What?
Because I started feeling anxious.
What do you mean?
I was like, I don't want to see people.
Well, anxious about what?
About seeing real people.
Like you actually almost turned around 3 times?
I almost turned around 3 times.
What were you worried about specifically?
Well, first of all, I was going to be meeting my boss in person for the first time.
Oh, you'd never met your boss?
I never met my boss.
Oh.
Because my boss changed 3 times during the pandemic.
Oh.
And so I was going to be like, hi. That was a little nerve-wracking. Also, we were seeing this person from a different country who I'd only seen on VCs in person, and that was nerve-wracking.
So let me ask you this. Given your personality, that you are normally pretty extroverted,
right,
and charming,
and show up to the party, no problem.
But were you putting too much pressure on yourself?
I guess so. Again, for whatever reason, in my head, it felt as if it was the first human encounter I was about to have in 2 years.
Yeah.
Even though that's ridiculous and stupid.
But it's the first human encounter where you could get fired.
I get. Oh yeah, maybe there was some weird subconscious, like, if I don't show up properly,
yeah, I
could get fired.
Yeah.
Even though that wasn't a real risk.
But because it'd been so long since you'd had that tested.
That's true. And then I should mention, part of it too was like because I went through my health crisis. Then it was like, oh God, I haven't seen anyone from work since all that happened. And so I was like, and they knew I had an operation and stuff. So I'm like feeling a little self-conscious about that as well. But in the end, when I showed up, it was such a relief. It's like, oh, people are real. And then I actually afterwards, I went for a couple of beers with one of my coworkers. Yeah. Oh, by the way, super embarrassing. When I first see this coworker, I go, oh my gosh, I finally meet you in person. And he goes, what are you talking about? We had met in person before the pandemic. And I was so like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And then I did remember, but in my mind, I had become only associating him with meetings over the internet and stuff. So then I profusely apologized. But I went to have some beers and it was great. It was like a great, bonding thing. So it turned out fine, but it was very stressful.
Well, let's take a break. When we get back, more emails. What do you say, Berto?
Let's do it. Yep.
All right, we're back from the break. Let's do some OPPs.
OPP.
Some old patron praise.
It's easy as 1, 2, 3.
These patrons became patrons back in February of 2019, Berto. Remember back then?
No, that's pre-pandemic. I've lost all
and they have, not only did they become patrons, but they stayed patrons through all of our BS this entire time. And there's a lot of them this month. We got Lindsay from Nanaimo, California. We got Ashley from Michigan.
Nice.
We have Hava from Michigan.
Ooh, Hava.
I think it's MI, Michigan, probably.
Yeah.
Missouri is MO.
You tell me.
Mississippi is MS. Pretty sure Michigan's MI.
That sounds like Michigan.
Emily from Salt Lake City. We got Deborah from Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Mm-hmm. We have Miriam, who's an annual deserving listener from Madison, Wisconsin.
Whoa.
We have Relika from Tartu EE.
R2D2? She's from R2D2?
EE country code. What is any guesses, Berto? EE
Estonia.
Country. That's a good one. EE country code. Estonia, you're right.
Oh my God.
You got it.
I pulled that out of my Estonia.
You got it. Roxanne from God knows where. She Shiraz from, who's an upper tier patron, God knows where. Tessa from Edmonds, Washington, just a little.
Oh, in the neighborhood.
Just a little bit north here. Lorraine from Allen, Texas. Chris from Astoria, New York. Valerie from God knows where. Paul from Norwich, Great Britain. Cindy from Austin, Texas. Catherine from Portland, Oregon. Kristen from Johnson City, Texas.
Lots of Texas.
I wonder who's that named after. We got Benjamin from Monroe, Louisiana. Summer from Austin, Texas. So we got 2 Austin, Texas. And we got good old Rachel from Puyallup.
Nice. Hi, Rachel.
Rachel, I know. So thank you all for becoming patrons and staying patrons through all of our BS for almost 3 years.
Domo arigato.
Okay, so next email. Patron Susie from Oregon says, I have been recently gifted greater insight into psychosis that may inform Umberto's opinions. As my autoimmune thyroid disease dropped my organs' function, it caused a rare type of madness. I became dangerously close to violence.
Wow.
The lack of thyroid hormone made it seem that everyone I loved dearly had been replaced by a doppelganger who had taken my family, wife, and best friend hostage. So in that state, harm to any one of the doppelgangers would have been to save the ones that I love, something I now know I could never imagine doing, even if my delusion was reality.
Wow.
Psychosis can happen to the best of us. Did you talk about this at all, or I don't know, like what's your response to that?
But so when I realized that I had thyroid issues, I did start encountering a lot of people in my life that apparently also had thyroid issues. One of them was the mother of my sister-in-law, which makes her my mother-in-law second removed or something. I don't know. Anyways, she had or has hypothyroidism, and she takes medicine for it. And she described that she had become, before she was diagnosed, she had become super aggressive and like feeling super violent. I think she became somewhat violent, and she had no idea why. And so I've heard about this before.
Yeah.
Now, in my case, when I became hypothyroid, it was in the middle of compensating for the hyperthyroidism. And I was feeling so bad, so poorly, that I didn't have time to wish ill on anyone, because I felt like I was moribund, like I felt like I was going to die. But anyways, I have heard of this, and it sounds terrifying. What I will say is that I've noticed in my own behavior, when I get a little more on the hyper side, I get a bit manic, and I get short-tempered. And then when I get a little bit more on the hypo side, things bother me a lot more than normal. I get super irritable about little things. So I can only imagine. And yeah, the thyroid controls so many things. I'm not surprised it would actually trigger some really bad stuff in your head.
Yeah, I don't know that much about this condition. I know it's a diagnosed condition psychiatrically for some. The little bit I know about, I don't know how it relates to the thyroid, but there are some people who will have brain damage and injury of some kind from a stroke maybe, or surgery. And there's this, I remember hearing in class, there's this theory of our perception of our relationships that goes like this. We have several different parts of the brain that are involved in putting together who someone is to us. Mm-hmm. So like when I'm looking at you right now, Berto, you're across the table, and there's all these visual realities that I'm seeing: your hair, your eyes, the way you're moving, this kind of thing. But yeah, as Berto's doing silly movements. But there's so that's going through. If I remember right, there's two processes that are happening at the same time. One is just the visual model that's being created in my mind based on the neurons that are firing in the back of my eyes. But there's this other thing that's happening where it's matching up with my emotional associations with the visual thing. When you look at a flower, by the time you're a certain age, you don't just see the pixels, in the back of your head. Right. You can smell it. It reminds you of summer, And when I look at you, Berto,
I remind you of summer. You can smell me.
yeah, there's this feeling I get from it. You know, right. I'm not a computer looking at a pixel. I'm a squishy, you know, organic biological machine that is processing things, and I process it through this emotional association center. And when I have an injury to that emotional association center, people will report that the people that, you know, are in their family, they'll say that person looks like my wife, mm-hmm. but they are not my wife.
Right.
And then you're like, well, how could we prove to you that this actually is your wife? And it's say, well, I don't know, the person would know my history, and then the wife will know the history, and they'll be like, no, you're still not my wife.
That's you're
scary.
Not really so scary.
Yeah. And so the thyroid fluctuation must have,
well, the thyroid affects a lot of nerve function. So for example, at a basic level, when you start getting hyper, you start feeling all sorts of weird buzzing sensations throughout your legs and body and stuff. It's just nerves like getting affected. Hypo can also do this. So at some point, and again, I don't know the details, but I'm imagining that in severe hypothyroidism, it can affect your central nervous system and maybe areas of the brain. Man, that is scary.
Yeah. Famous patron Ed wrote in and said, "Hi, Kirk and Umberto. Just listened to today's episodes on dealing with failure, and I feel compelled to chime in that I too got fired from my first actual paying job as a school psychologist.
Oh.
It was 1993. So famous patron Ed, for those who don't know, active participant on the Facebook fan page. He got fan of the year last year, I believe.
Wow.
So he says he got fired from his first therapy job. At an elementary school, there were some very difficult kids, but I really enjoyed them and connected well with them. At mid-year, I was told by the principal that I was not, quote unquote, assertive enough, and they had doubts about keeping me on for a second year. I see now that it's laughable because, like at your internship, it was literally my first year on the job. How was I supposed to be assertive? The teachers and students loved me and respected me, by the way, and the other psychologists as well. Shortly thereafter, because I was affected by this, thing that said you got to be more assertive or we're not going to hire you next year. Shortly thereafter, in a very high-stakes meeting about a student with lawyers and psychiatrists in the room, I was feeling pressured and under the gun, and I had a very public panic attack when it was my time to speak. I was fired the next day.
Wow.
It was the hardest thing I'd ever experienced. I have this surreal memory of driving around and hearing Natalie Merchant's Carnival a zillion times that summer and feeling lost. All these years later, it still stings, even though I've had an amazing run as a school psychologist and I've developed a full private practice. But I'd say to the patron who wrote in, or any other person about failure, that you need to hang in there, learn from these things, and not give up. And I'm glad I didn't give up. That experience is part of what makes me the person and therapist I am today. So good episode, the two of you. It definitely hit home for me. Famous patron Ed.
Yeah, nice. Man, that sounds rough, but yeah, good on him, man. He stuck with it. And in life, it's so hard to second guess yourself, or it's almost a fruitless endeavor to second guess yourself. There's a lot of things where I go back and I think, I wish I could go back in time. And if I went back in time, I would do this different, I would do this different, I would do this different. But in reality, any different choices you make along your timeline end up in a totally different timeline, and you have no idea what comes from that. So the fact is, you can only act on the data in front of you, and it takes a lot of courage to, when you're seeing data in front of you that says you suck, you're fired, to sit there and have courage in your conviction and say, well, but this is what I love, this is what I want to do, and so I'm going to persevere. It takes a lot of courage.
Well, and it takes, for me, mentorship to tell me that you're okay, give it another shot.
Absolutely.
I would never have given another shot. I would never have had the quote-unquote courage if I drew logical conclusions that I was not made for this career, since I got fired and told in many ways, shapes, and forms that I was a terrible human and a terrible therapist.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing when I hear these stories, including my own stories, it's like, where is the responsibility of the people that are your seniors in charge of you that are telling you this? Like, do they bear no responsibility?
Well, so yeah, they bear no responsibility, and that's why I wrote an entire book on supervision. Yes. A big reason was because of this experience I had, because I was completely failed by that supervisor, and frankly, of the 17, 20 supervisors I've had in my career, most were terrible. And it matches up with the statistics when we actually ask people to, rank your supervisors. They ask, are they abusive? That would be terrible. Are they not useful? That would also be terrible. Or are they useful? And most are either not useful or abusive.
Oh my God, that's horrible.
But then you look at, Berto, what does it take to be a supervisor? What is it, how do you get the job as a supervisor? What do you think?
Aggressiveness and, stomping on others.
Well, you would think there'd be qualifications that you'd have to meet, right? Yeah. Like you'd need certain trainings or some, and there's nuances to this in the various different professions, but generally speaking, you need extremely minimal qualifications.
Well, in my case, years and years ago, I was an individual contributor in my job, and I was really good at it. And so my manager goes, "Hey, you're really good at your job, so I'm going to make you a supervisor."
Yeah.
And I didn't want to, because honestly, I liked just being. Yeah. So I was like,
being good with vacuum tubes gives you no abilities to manage human beings.
Exactly. But that's so common that you're like, well, you're really good at doing this one particular thing, so I'm going to put you in charge of other humans. And they're not the same thing.
Yeah. Anonymous patron Esmond from Minneapolis, he writes, did Many Saints of Newark justify a sequel to the Psychology of Tony Soprano Psychology in Seattle episode? After seeing Many Saints of Newark, which I really liked in spite of many lukewarm or negative reviews, I listened to the Psychology of Tony Soprano Psychology episode again, Psychology in Seattle episode again. That episode's focus on the HARE checklist, the psychopathy checklist, was super interesting. What the Many Saints of Newark made me interested in was Tony's relationship with his mother, Livia, his relationship with his dad, Johnny, his relationship with Junior, his relationship with Dickie Moltisanti. The tagline of the poster is, "Who made Tony Soprano?" By posing some interesting questions in this movie, I think the movie succeeded in giving the psychological depth to Tony that we see in the HBO series. Johnny Boy seemed like an aloof, superficial, and absent father figure. How did that affect Tony? When Johnny Boy was in jail, how did Livia treat Tony? Did she prentify him and in what ways did she abuse him? Was there more than emotional abuse there? Why is Junior intent on knocking Tony down a peg by repeatedly pointing out his failure to be a varsity athlete? How attuned are the adults around Tony to Tony's true interests, desires, and aptitudes? Why does Dickie Moltisanti emerge as a surrogate father figure to Tony, and how did Dickie's eventual shunning of Tony affect Tony's psychology? Berto, what do you think?
Yeah, actually, so you and I both watched it, and I liked it, and yet a lot of people disliked it. I read a lot of reviews, or watched a lot of reviews on YouTube, I should say. They made good points, but I still enjoyed it. I thought there was a lot of good stuff. Yeah. And I agree, they went richer with all the sources of both positive and negative, mostly negative influences to Tony. What's interesting about it is they made, I don't know if this was purposeful but they made it seem like Tony was actually a lot better adjusted in some ways, and that it was mostly his environment that turned him. Mm-hmm. And I guess so, but I would have expected by the age they showed him that he was already engaged in way more than just stealing an ice cream truck, based on the show that we had watched. In other words, when I saw the series, I would have imagined that as a teenager, he would have already been in some serious trouble.
Yeah. So I don't know if I ever thought like what he was doing specifically earlier on, but the way that the movie did it was, one, totally in line with the way the TV show was. Because, the TV show rarely just laid out like, this causes this.
Right. It was never a black and white situation.
Yeah. And a cheesier, because, where else do we see these kinds of stories? Well, we see, the first Batman movie. How did Batman become Batman?
Well, because the necklace fell on the floor, and so what are you gonna do?
Right.
There were bats in the cave, but like what else?
How did Joker become Joker? How did Spider-Man become Spider-Man? Yeah. We have all these very obvious connections with childhood and adulthood, but in reality, with human beings, it's much less clear. And it would, because the thing that I really liked about if you don't know, Many States of Newark is a movie. It's essentially about, Sopranos is about Tony Soprano as an adult, a family man, and he's a mobster. Many States of Newark is when he's like 17 or something. And the thing I really liked about the movie was, as a teenager, he's just a regular teenager.
Yeah.
He's a teenager in the mid 70s, I think, and he's just doing mid 70s teenager things. And they're a little rough around the edges, but he's not like a killer, because why would he be? He's just a kid.
And especially because what they showed, which I hadn't caught from the series, because, well, of course they didn't show it, is there were some people in his life purposely trying to not steer him into that.
Right. Yeah. Because they wanted better things for him, and they didn't think he needed to be that way. And so, but at the same time, it wasn't like they were really trying hard not to steer. So what we see is a real typical family, really, a typically dysfunctional family. You have a absent father. You have a stressed out mom who's narcissistic and doesn't care about other people. Yep. You have three siblings. You have Tony and his two sisters that are just kind of lost and just trying to live their lives and trying to eke out a little bit of fun or self-esteem. And you have at the center of the movie, you have Dickie Moltisanti, who is his uncle or friend of the family, and he's the only character in this movie and in this world who seems to have a little bit of morality to him. He's trying to make the world a better place. Right. Even though he's in the mob and he's kind of stuck in that, but he in each interaction he's like, okay, let's not destroy the world in this. Let's try to do a little bit of good here. And then he kind of bonds with Tony, and he's like, I want Tony to have a good life. I want him to be a different sort of a person. And because I see how horrible this can be, look at my life. Look at my relationship with my dad. Look at my relationship with my dad's girlfriend. So he's really trying to help Tony, and then in the end, he shuns Tony,
but not because he wants to, but because he feels he needs to.
Right. He's trying to shun him because because he doesn't want Tony to be wrapped up in the mob.
Right.
And he shuns him, and then that's the last, and that kind of culminates in that last scene. Tony's like, Uncle Dickie, you promised me you'd buy me beer or something. Yeah. Let me in. And Dickie Moltisanti's just ignoring, and then so at that point in this, so that's why. So at that point of the story, if it just ended that way, Tony might have gone hung out with the jocks and just became a regular working stiff. But then Dickie Moltisanti gets whacked, and is dumped somewhere, and so then Tony's like, oh, that's why he didn't answer the door.
Yeah. So now he has an absentee father who then not promptly, but eventually dies as well. And now he's got another secondary father who does die,
who gets killed by bad guys, and now Tony gets the inkling for revenge, and he's at a crossroads. But he chose, and that's what's so consistent with the Sopranos TV show is there were these many key moments where Tony Soprano could go one way or the other way. And 9 times out of 10, he always chose the wrong way. He always chose the evil, murderous, self-destructive way. He chose to kill Chris. He chose to kill Ralphie. You know, he chooses to look the other way when this other, you know, but occasionally he would choose. But when he was 17, he could have chose, but he didn't.
I will say, I knew different kinds of kids, as you did too, when I was growing up, and I could tell already in like 7th grade who were gonna be jerks and assholes in society. And that was the one thing that I thought was not quite right, is that yes, he would have been doing normal teenage things, but you would have seen he would have been a dick. He would have been a
well, he kind of was.
Bully.
I mean, he wasn't like
but
a glowing example of.
And maybe they showed him a lot with his family, in which case he would have been putting on a bit more of a nice persona. But I don't know. That's the only part that I'm like, he felt a little too cherubic at times. Like no, he would be a bigger dick than this, you know.
Yeah.
Now they did show some things like where he like steals an ice cream truck. Okay, like who steals an ice cream truck? Yeah. But anyways, I did enjoy it, and I agree with your points there, for sure.
Yeah, and then you ask Esmond about, you know, what we see. I will say that, you know, what we see with the father and Livia and Junior was almost too on the nose in some ways. Like, I don't remember learning anything new. I'm like, oh, that's just those characters younger, acting in very similar ways that they would have acted when they were older. You know,
the scene where the father comes back from jail, I saw this critique on one of those YouTube videos, and I sort of agree with it, because all he was fixated on was that there were black people moving into the neighborhood. And the video pointed out, and I tend to agree with this, that in reality, even a racist prick doesn't show up from jail and yell at their whole family about how like they're first going to be like, oh, hey, what's going on? And then after they get a drink in them, they're like, by the way, what the hell is going,
Yeah.
Like, so it was like you're saying, a little on the nose, like, okay, yes, we get it. He's a racist prick. But there were a few moments like that. At the same time, I felt like they were trying to balance giving the audience a little bit of sugar. Like, we wanted to see Uncle June say, like, he doesn't have the makings of a varsity athlete. That was kind of fun,
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, and then I think what we can also learn about the story, the fictional story, is that where they all came from must have all also been very dysfunctional. You know, we didn't see the making of Junior. We already saw Junior as a very problematic person already. The mother and the father, because the question you would have, but we had flashbacks in the show that showed, that the things from, but it wasn't this detailed. But, one of the questions you could have about Livia is, did she become jaded and cynical because of what happened to her in her adult life? From the movie, it's like she already was a jerk.
Right. Although, and I did like this aspect. So there was that one moment where, I forget what it was, like Tony's like, hey, was it a song or a story she would read him or something like that?
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And for a second, her maternal instinct
Right.
shone through, and then she pulled right back, you know? So you could get that sense that, well, there used to be a little bit more of a semblance of a maternal figure. But yes, she was always a bit of damaged goods. And then she just got worse and worse with age.
Right.
Same thing with Uncle Junior. Like, he was clearly not as embittered and resentful at all times. However, he was already feeling like he was being passed over. He was already feeling jealousy. He was already,
Yeah, he was always a vindictive, jealous, insecure kind of joke, right?
And everyone kind of treated him that way. And so it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah. But yeah, I really liked the movie, and it kind of stuck with me, and I want to watch it again. And I think that, I didn't watch any of the critiques. Would you say that the critiques are yeah, and critiques are critiques. People can take it however they want to take it. But do you think it was partially due to the fact that they wanted it to be a shoot 'em up where it was like Tony kicking ass?
I'm sure some of them were. The ones I watched, I actually thought were fair critiques, and they were really more about. They were critiquing it the way they would critique any movie. Like, this scene was a little chopped up, like stuff like that, as well as some of the on the nose things or whatever. But I didn't agree with all of it. It was just like, okay, those are fair points. I imagine there was a set of people that were like, oh, because we even discussed it. The preview kind of didn't do it justice.
Yeah.
The preview made it look like this was going to be young Tony kicking ass.
Right.
And it was like, no, there was one scene where, and actually totally out of context from what you would have thought was.
Right.
Like that fight had nothing to do with Tony being a bully kicking ass.
Yeah, and I also consider it to be a Chase. What's his name? Chase? David Chase?
David Chase, yeah.
He notoriously, and I think to good effect with Sopranos, was constantly subverting the audience's desires. Yeah. He would sort of knew, like, I know you want Chris to actually win, and become. I know you want the series to end,
and he overcomes his drug addiction.
Yeah, we want him to overcome his drug addiction. I know you want him to be with the girl. What's her face? His wife.
Yeah, Adriana.
And I know you want him to succeed after Tony is gone. Because
big pussy is gonna find a way to turn it around, and like maybe. And they'll work it out.
And Paulie isn't a dick.
Paulie eventually, well, he is, but he eventually becomes he becomes likable,
right?
And then
and I know you want what's his face, the
Furio or
no, the other guy. There's Paulie, and then there's Pussy, and then there's
Vince. Yes,
the guy from the E Street Band.
Bada Bing. Yeah. Silvio.
I know you want Silvio to just die or to come back, but we're just going to leave him in the hospital in a coma. You know what I mean?
And the Russian. Oh, I can't wait for the Russian.
Yeah.
What's going to happen with the Russian?
Right. So with Game of Thrones, since everyone wants Clegane game or whatever, Bowl, Clegane Bowl.
Clegane Bowl. They got Clegane
Bowl in this really stupid way, and it was epic, and it was, but at the same time, it's like, David Chase is like, nope. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make a movie about Tony Soprano, and he's just a kid. But the movie is going to be about this other guy that you never even, or you barely heard being referenced, Dickie Moltisanti.
I will tell you one unfortunate angle that was taken in a couple of the reviews I saw, and this was, they made this big deal about like racial divide and like animosity between the Italian mobsters and the blacks, and that's totally made up, and that's ridiculous. And I was like, you gotta be kidding me. That has gotta be a joke. Like, they had a problem with that.
Right. Yeah, I mean, so I felt like that did feel like a little bit of, I don't know if it's pandering is the right word, or just insertion or something. It didn't bother me, but I did I was like, this is kind of an interesting side, a B story to this that doesn't seem to be like central. And it wouldn't make sense that it was central because of, I don't know, just the history of that family. It did have a feeling of, because what people on the internet will say today, which I don't think is as true as they say it is, that, the woke police are writing scripts now to write in people of color and women and LGBTQ people, and it's all just this PC movie making, like, of course the new Star Wars got to have a woman at the beginning, and I'm just like, why wouldn't it have a woman? But I think in the Many Saints of Newark, that storyline, although was interesting, and I kind of liked how the thing that it did for me was it situated it in history. I'm like, oh yeah, that's because I know that was things that was happening in the 60s and 70s were these race riots and protests and stuff. And so it just kind of helped to historicalize it to me. I
also felt, of course I can't be in his mind, but I felt that Chase was actually trying to make a point, like, because a lot of the narrative of the mob and it was shown in The Sopranos and stuff, is woe is us. Like, we're only doing this because we got to survive, and we've been treated terribly in this country, and we came as immigrants, and what else are we supposed to do? And because that's the narrative. When you hear these gangsters talk, they're never like, yeah, I'm a bad guy. They're always like, hey man, I just do what I got to do to survive, right. And I think there was this contrast with, like, you want to talk about real social problems? Like, these people have it really bad.
Right.
So, and I got that sense. I don't know how much he was intending. Maybe he was just on a PC kick. I don't know. But I got that sense from it.
Yeah.
Like, your problems as a group don't justify you going out and terrorizing people and killing them.
Interesting. I didn't really read that, but if that came across, that makes sense. So anonymous patron, she wrote in and said, what is your favorite Smith song, Berto?
It's got to be Please, Please, Please Let Me Get What I Want.
Right.
It's a really great, it's sort of a very odd song, and he already sings in a very interesting and unique way. But it's got, like, the way he sings it evokes the feeling of the lyrics, of, like, this longing for, like, I haven't, been happy in such a long time. Like, I just need this. And, like,
just let me get what I want.
Yeah.
Just this one time. Yeah. This song, when I first heard it when I was, I don't know, like 15 or 16, it had a huge effect on me. I mean, there's some other great Smith songs that I listened to in the 80s, Girlfriend in a Coma, obviously How Soon Is Now, Charming Man. Stop me if you think you've heard this one before. There's a whole slew of them, and the songs are so timeless. It's right in the middle of the 80s, but they're just it's complicated. The bass lines are fascinating. Obviously the guitar, Johnny Marr, the drums are pretty good, but Please, 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 the lyrics and the production short. The first time I heard it was on, I think it was the Pretty in Pink soundtrack. It was like the closer, I think. And yeah,
oh really?
Yeah.
Whoa.
That song, because there's another version of that song on one of their albums, but I was mainly familiar with the soundtrack version, and that's usually the version that people know about. Berto, favorite Depeche Mode song?
Oh yeah, But Not Tonight. We've talked about this before.
Wait, so we both have we coincide on Smith's song and Depeche Mode.
Yes. Yeah. But Not Tonight is another song where
it's kind of a similar depressing vibe as Please, Please, Please.
Yeah. So, But Not Tonight. And actually, I never knew that it was about like overcoming alcoholism, and I guess in a bigger sense, dependency. But I never really knew what it was about. It didn't matter. I always felt that the song evoked imagery so vividly,
Yeah.
Oh God, it's raining. Like immediately you're like, oh yeah, I can get it. It's like nighttime, it's raining, but I'm not complaining.
Yeah.
Oh, you're not. And it's interesting immediately, like, because yeah, we associate rain in media, movies, everything was like, oh, it's raining. It's time to be depressed. It's time to be bad. But all of a sudden, I'm not complaining.
Yeah.
In fact, it's filling me up with new life.
Yeah.
Like, what?
Yeah, there's this, I imagine there's some people when they want to get jazzed up and sort of energized, they listen to songs like
we will rock you.
Yeah, or even like America by Neil Diamond or something. Or it's that one song, We're America, or what, I don't know.
Yeah.
But for me, what gets me going is sad, happy songs like But Not Tonight or Please, Please, Please. These songs, I feel more energized after listening to them.
Well,
like the image of, and we've talked about this many times before, but just to go over this, and actually for the 13th, I gave you a poster with all these lyrics on it. On a cassette tape.
I have it hanging on my wall.
But just to drill down on this, oh God, it's raining, but I'm not complaining. It's filling me up with new life. That feeling when I first heard the song again, when I was about 15, 16 years old, I knew exactly, or I felt I knew exactly what he was talking about. Like the feeling of going outside. Mm-hmm. There's all these associations, like being a teenager and having freedom, to go out into the world at the age of 16 and do whatever you want to do. And nighttime was usually when those things would happen. And, in Seattle, it gets dark, early. So it's night a lot of the time in the winter months. And that feeling of it's raining, but I'm not complaining. In fact, I feel energized. This is giving me new life, man. Like, I want to take on the world tonight. I want to do everything tonight. I want to do things tonight. I want to live life tonight. And sober, when I was in high school, I didn't drink or anything.
Course. So we couldn't relate to the literal meaning.
But it is kind of literal meaning in that he's saying, I don't want to drink tonight.
Right.
I want to just have a sober, awesome night. You know what I mean? And
so the very beginning, dun 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 dun. If you've ever written a song, coming up with a immediately catchy lick, an immediately catchy melody is hard, and it's rare, and that is so simple and yet so immediately complex and captivating. It's like dun 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 dun.
Yeah.
Dun 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 dun.
And I know you have listened to every part. There's so many different instruments in that song. Mm-hmm. I covered this song, as you know, and had to and by ear studied each sound and tried to emulate it. And so it's just it's a perfectly written and produced song. Anyway, runners up. Dreaming of Me by Depeche Mode.
Dreaming of Me.
Everything Counts in Small Amounts. Of course, Enjoy the Silence. See You was a early favorite of mine. Shake the Disease. Question of Lust, I love. Never Let Me Down Again. Blasphemous Rumors. When I was making this list earlier, I realized that even Violator, I loved Violator when it came out.
Violator to me is top 5 best albums.
Yeah, I listened to it. I listened to it nonstop, 1990 or whenever it came out. I think.
But I think you're heading in the direction that a lot of your favorite songs aren't on Violator.
Yeah, when I have a go-to Depeche Mode playlist time, I'm not jazzed about Violator.
Music for the Masses and Black Celebration have a ton of
and even earlier, anyway,
so one of my favorites is Sometimes only sometimes, and that song is about being honest and being in the spotlight and being okay with being embarrassed.
I remember
laying your soul bare.
I remember, it's funny looking back at those songs, because in the 80s Depeche Mode had such a aura around them of mystery and Europeanness that when they had really simple lyrics and songs like that, I always just figured it was ironic.
Interesting.
I always figured they must be playing with this a little bit because they seemed so transcendent as humans. Because this is before the internet, so if the lens that I could see Depeche Mode through was their videos and their album art. Right.
And actually, and the songs that were so well produced where every sound mattered.
Yeah.
Because, there's a lot of songs where you can arrange them in a billion different ways and the song still shines through. Their arrangements, their production was so meticulous.
And dark noises and anger.
And I get what you're saying. It's like, you don't imagine that was coming out of normal human beings.
Right.
There's this conclave of European vampires.
You're right. They live in some underground industrial zone and, live off of oil or something. She also asks an anonymous patron our favorite Cardigan song. Berto, I don't think you have a favorite Cardigan song.
I only have the one. What, Love Me?
Love Fool.
Love me.
So my favorite Cardigan song is Holy Love. It's a beautiful song. Really, there's so many others Cardigan songs.
You've been after me. You know what? I'm going to... Either you need to recommend a playlist or maybe I'm just going to listen.
Really, any of their albums, honestly. Really? Gran Turismo, Super Extra Gravity.
I'm tired of not being in the know.
Explode or Implode is a great song. The one song I can't listen to is Love Fool. I think if I hadn't had it overplayed to me, I would be like, oh, that's a fun kind of quirky song. But since it was so overplayed in 1998 or something, I cannot listen to it. Then she also asked, do you like Interpol, Berto?
Yeah, when Interpol came out, I'm not a huge fan in that. I didn't end up following them too much, but when they first came out, it was so refreshing. Now, keep in mind, time is weird. Interpol came out in the late 90s?
I don't know.
Yeah, and to me, it felt like it had been decades and decades and decades since Depeche Mode and Joy Division and New Order. So when Interpol came out, basically very influenced by that, I thought, oh, they're bringing back this music from 100 years ago when my grandfather was a child. And instead, it was only a few years later. But it was great. I thought it was kind of a throwback. They had a really cool style. Some of their songs I really enjoyed. That said, I don't think I could name songs now because I haven't heard them for years. But I was really into it when they came out.
Yeah, I love Interpol, and still listen to this day. People sometimes say, like you say, Berto, they're a throwback. But to me, I think that they're eternally like new and unique. And yeah, I mean...
Well, and to be fair, I only heard them when they first came out. And I think their first album drew a lot of comparisons to like New Order and stuff like that.
But to me, that's like saying the Beatles are just like Elvis, or the Beatles are, just like Buddy Holly or something. It's like, yeah, but the Beatles are the Beatles, and of course the Interpol isn't the Beatles, but Interpol to me is so good and so unique and so so much better than a lot of the stuff that they're compared to. I'm like, well, unless you're saying that they improved on it greatly, because as a person who grew up in the 80s and listened to New Order, there's some really bad New Order tracks.
Yeah, but you gotta understand, some of the best New Order is some of my favorite music.
Totally, and I get that, but to me, I just appreciate Interpol for what it is, and every band has past influences. And PDA, the EP version, I've listened to thousands of times. I've played drums along with it. It's a real fun song to play the drums to. I kind of learned how to play the drums trying to emulate Interpol's drummer. Some of the songs are impossible to emulate because the drums are just like really particular. But so yeah, my favorite is PDA, the EP version. And it's just a beautiful song. And the bassist in that band is just possibly the best bassist that's ever lived in rock. Like wow. he is so imaginative and so groovy and so interesting. And because the guitar parts are real strokesy and simple, and so the bass has a lot of room to like move around, right. and he really does.
Which was the case in New Order. Peter Hook basically would write melodies on his bass line.
Right. Yeah. And my favorite album is Turn on the Bright Lights. Antics LP is pretty good, but Turn on the Bright Lights was really the first album that I'm
going to have to go back and now listen to more Interpol.
Yeah. Really good stuff. And right up my alley. It's like Strokes adjacent to me in a way. And I love the guy's voice. I love his choices, and his lyrics are so interesting. Because similar to how we were talking about Martin Gore, and sometimes, if you really listen, if you just read the lyrics to an Interpol song, it's like, if you just take it literally, which I think he might even be I think he's so meta, the lyrics writer, that he's like, I know that you think, because of how intense our music is, that our songs are going to be about like these really intense things. But I'm just going to write about extremely mundane things about life. Like if you read the lyrics, it looks like that's what he's doing.
Interesting.
But when you hear him sing, and you're not really paying attention to the lyrics, you're just like, oh, there must be something really intense going on there, like some kind of drug infested orgy that he was a part of and someone died. But when you listen to the stuff, it's just about like PDA, like public displays of affection, or someone coming over and sleeping on your couch, and you don't like him there. Like there's these really mundane things in his lyrics. But
it's like, we talked about this the other day, but I recently had made a cover of Born to Be Wild, and that, as I was singing the lyrics, I was like, oh my gosh, this song is about nothing. Like, sure, it's literally like, I'm born to be wild. But the lyrics are like, get your motor running. Head out on the highway. Like, it's not a lot. But it feels a lot bigger when you're actually singing it, When you're singing along to it, it's so much energy.
Famous patron Lyndon wrote in and said, which albums were equivalent to the Phantom Menace to you? Albums which you wanted to like so much.
I have this list. Yes.
You wanted to like so much, you eventually had to concede were flawed, or opposite albums that grew on you. So which albums did you love at first and then realize, no, it's terrible, or I don't like this, but it grew on you, Berto?
Give me a second.
I'll tell mine. So mine was the second Knack album. So people know about the Knack as, My Sharona. And that was their first album in 1979, 1980 called Get the Knack. And people who don't know, they were basically like the Beatles. They were huge for like a year or a year or two. And the whole album, similar to Cardigans, My Sharona is one of the weaker songs on that album. That whole album is just a jam. I mean, the drummer is just like amazing, and the harmonies and the songwriting and the guitarist and the bassist, everyone's really great in that band. Get the Knack is a great album, and their second album was highly anticipated. I mean, this was like, Beatles #2 album, and it flopped.
Oh.
It has a pretty good jam on it that's obviously trying to draft on the My Sharona thing, because it's a similar kind of song to My Sharona, but it pales in comparison. But the rest of the album is like not great, and I always wanted to like it because of how much I loved. And just to give you an idea of why I love the Knack is, in my house growing up, we had 30 albums, 30 LPs. So that was all you could listen to. And one of them, I don't know why, was Get the Knack.
Yeah.
And so at the age of 10, I'm listening to this music that's, every song is about lust and about wanting to screw your classmate, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And, but I didn't understand it, but it got under my skin at the age of 10 years old, and defined what rock music, what pop music was, and it's so pure. So I think if I heard that music for the first time today, I'd be like, oh yeah, it's pretty good 80s music.
Right. But at the time,
it just completely, and it is still very, very good. I think it is that great. But anyway, Berto, what album?
All right. So I have two here, and oh my gosh, I'm going to lose so many points of respect from so many people around the world, including you on one of them at least. So one of the Phantom Menace albums for me is Radiohead in Rainbows.
Yeah, I that's my favorite Radiohead album.
Okay, so here's the thing. I love Radiohead. Everything up to Kid A is great for me. Then they went through a period of like 2 or 3 albums that I it's fine. I just wasn't into them,
Yeah.
And then In Rainbows came out, and I thought, okay, they're coming back. And I bought it.
You didn't have to buy it. It was free.
No, I bought it.
You donated.
Oh, whatever. Fine. Okay, yes. But because I only said that with emphasis because I never used to steal music, ever. But I got it. And I was so excited. And I played it all the time, and I loved it. I played it on repeat while I was working at home on my computer, in and out, over and over and over. I was like, oh my God, this is so great. They're back. And then, like Phantom Menace, over time, I was like, I can't remember any songs. And then I went to their concert, and I was so excited. And then every time they would play an In Rainbow song, I was like, huh. So I don't know what happened to me. Maybe my brain is damaged now. But for some reason, that album made me realize that they had left me.
That's the first Radiohead album I actually really liked.
That's so bizarre. I wonder, now I want to hear it again, because honestly, like, if you right now were offering me $6 billion, I couldn't name, let alone sing a song.
Well, so like Led Zeppelin, their names sometimes rarely connect with the actual song.
Sure, that's fair.
And their latter stuff is so anti-hook related that it wouldn't surprise me if you couldn't sing one of the riffs.
But that album was a little less like that than some of their previous albums.
I don't know. I think maybe what happened is you just found like, I don't think I like this, and then you got real angry.
I did.
Because I think if you re-listen to it, there's probably at least 3 songs where you're like, okay fine, that is a solid.
Fair enough. That's probably right. Because like I said, when I first got in and started listening, I liked it. I thought, oh, great. Because like I'll say, like, I guess Amnesiac and whatever the one after that, they're, like I have only respect for their musicality. They're geniuses. They're amazing. But it was a style that left me. They went a little too further off into different directions. I just wasn't that interested. Whereas this one actually kind of started to rope me back in. For whatever reason, though, it didn't do the trick. And then the second one for me, this one also, oh my gosh, so many of Ron would probably disown me as well. But Songs of Faith and Devotion by Depeche Mode.
Oh yeah, I'm not a fan.
Okay, so here's the deal. There's a few songs on that album that I really love, but to me it represents a couple things. First of all, it was the first album past Violator.
Yeah, it represents the end of Depeche Mode.
Exactly, because, and I went to see this concert.
And the beginning of grunge, by the way.
Exactly. I went to see this concert, and they had sort of gotten really self-conscious about being an electro band. And they were like, okay, we need a drummer. Hey, one of us, hey, you play drums.
Yeah.
And we need to become a little harder edge.
Yeah.
Gahan, can you just like... sing a little more
and grow your hair grow your
hair. We'll be a little more rocking.
Yeah.
And they lost me.
Yeah, and Martin Gore started playing guitar.
And they lost me.
Well, I mean, I guess he always kind of played.
No, he did, but they got a little more into like that whole persona. So, and then the songs, there were a couple of songs in there that I actually.
But that
really
one song is so da 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 da.
I feel. Anyways,
wait, no, I just started. It's going to change here. Apparently, Martin Gore discovered like a blues riff and just like decided to repeat it over and over again.
And I hate because like I hate saying these things because I loved all their previous stuff. But anyways,
yeah. A similar thing happened to me with REM. So as an '80s REM kid, Fables of Reconstruction, early albums, Murmur, I loved them. And then when This One Goes Out to the One I Love,
which I love,
Document, that album, late 80s, I was pretty into that album, but and then their next album was in 90, which Shiny Happy People.
Right.
No, actually Green was after that. And that was Stand in the Place Where You Live. And then after that was Shiny Happy People, Out of Time, I believe it's called. Anyway.
Which one had their big first MTV hit? That's Me in the Corner. That's Me in the Spotlight.
Green.
Okay.
Is that Green?
That might be Green, yeah.
It's in that zone. But so at the time, I was really into those albums, and listen to them nonstop. Looking back, I cannot even listen to Document. I can only listen to their first 4 albums, which I consider to be genius, genius albums.
Which I don't think I know at all.
Yeah,
we've talked about this before. It's
well,
like,
dun 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 dun. Did you ever call? I waited for your call.
No, I don't.
Don't go back to Rockville.
Nope, I don't know any of this.
Oh, it's so good.
See, I am completely uninformed on early.
It's really down to earth, very upbeat, nothing cheesy. Like their latter stuff, like that suit, everybody hurts. Like that stuff, it's fine, but it's so different.
Very melodramatic.
Yeah, really melodramatic and obvious. And
it was, I guess it was their version of grungy angst.
Yeah. Yeah, they're getting obvious, I guess.
I guess it just influenced everyone the wrong way. Another kind of similar situation, FPL, that I'll say is
The Knife, the band The Knife, I think they're a Swedish band. You remember, Heartbeats, the song? Yeah, it's such a jam, that song. If you don't know the band Heartbeats by The Knife, listen to it. It hits you right between the eyes in the very first beat. Like, it is such a jam. And when I first heard this song in, 2007 or something, I instantly ran out and bought like anything I could get my hands on with The Knife, because I was like, this band is so good.
Amazing.
Nothing of their other stuff is anything close.
I don't think I've heard any of their.
In fact, it's almost it's an art band, and they obviously are trying to create something that's extremely niche in terms of its appeal. You know what I mean? They're not. They're really trying to subvert the appeal of the masses.
Right.
Another situation that happened was MGMT.
Oh, yeah.
Similar time, 2007, Ocular Spectacular, which you gave to me, which is behind us right now.
It's just amazing.
It's a masterpiece.
Yeah.
So much buzz. They were good. Huge. You had kids.
And you and I jammed to this. I mean, this was
hugely influenced. In fact, a lot of the songs I wrote at that time were influenced by that album. It was like, this is the new Beatles. Like, they're going to be huge.
Yeah.
And they have all the buzz in the world. There were elementary schools that were singing kids the song, and posting on the internet. Like, it was everywhere. And then, their next album comes out in 2010. They took a long time, and it was so anticipated. It's called Congratulations. Not a good album. No. It didn't have any of the jams that Ocular Spectacular had.
And I think they from the documentary I saw, I was like, they did it on purpose,
because they're like, you want us to just give you another Ocular Spectacular? We're not going to do that. We're too anti-establishment.
Which, man, hey, that's what freedom is all about.
Yeah. Another album that I think about that was Elliott Smith, his posthumous album, From the Basement on the Hill.
I don't know that one.
Well, so, he killed himself, and he was making an album at the time, and so the people rushed into the studio and finished all these unfinished songs, and they're not good. And he was obviously struggling at the time and having a hard time.
That's not fair, man. One shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
An artist should have final say over their product.
Another album is Prince's albums after Around the World in a Day. So you have Prince from 1979, you have Dirty Mind from 80, you have 1999 from 1982, you have Purple Rain from 1984, and then you have Around the World in a Day 1985. These are 5 very good out, particularly 1999, Purple Rain, Around the World in a Day. Yeah. His next album after that, I don't even know what it was, but pretty much from that, because I was locked in on Prince in 1985. I was just like, I'm a Prince person. And whatever album came out after that, I bought it, listened to it, and could not get through it. And there's some few shining moments like Alphabet Street.
But it's just, is it that became too random?
What do you mean?
Okay, I'm thinking the Batman soundtrack.
Well, he wrote that as a background soundtrack. It wasn't, I don't think, supposed to be listened to. I hate, we actually heard that song recently when we were at that event.
Yeah.
It's not really music.
Stop the press. Who is that?
If you're 12, you'll consider
Batman.
you consider that music. But if you have any taste in music, it's basically just him having fun with drum machines for a movie soundtrack. It's supposed to be played behind credits.
But it was a hit on the radio.
I know, but why would anyone want to put that song on? It's terrible.
It's Prince.
Anyway, so I think what happened was Prince is such a genius that he got bored with writing appealing music.
Yeah.
And he's just like, but I don't want to do that anymore. And Around the World in a Day is, you could kind of hear the transition there. He's pulling away from the obvious pop music, but it's still poppy enough for me to listen to, or still in the zone that I want to hear him. After that point, though, he gets really kind of, maybe experimental. I mean, there's some shining moments for sure, but anyway. So listener Bianca from Boston wrote in, Berto, What are the psychological effects of watching someone be killed? Just to switch gears here for a second. I have a question regarding the psychological impact of the witnesses to the George Floyd murder. Many spoke about feeling helpless as they watched Officer Chauvin press his knee into his neck. I wonder what other psychological effects a bystander might experience from such an experience. Berto, what do you think?
I've always wondered about this myself. I have not witnessed someone being killed in person. Luckily, I would say luckily. But I've always wondered about it. You know, whenever I watch a movie or I read about terrible news stories, I always wonder, man, how horrible. Now, I happen to be on one end of the spectrum. I didn't grow up on a farm, so even the idea of killing a chicken to me is sort of very difficult to process. The idea that there's this breathing, living organism that's got self-direction and it's got senses and everything, and then we grab it and then we like slice off the head, and then it like shakes around and blood squirts. That to me is difficult enough to process, let alone, you know, then a bigger animal like an ape or a cow or something. It's like, and then when I think about a human, yeah, I mean, I feel like it would immediately be very, very, very traumatic to me to witness something like that. And if I were in a position where I'm seeing it happen by people in authority, and I'm aware that if I try to intervene, I might get shot myself, and so then out of fear of my own life, I don't. Then I have that guilt and the terrible nightmares after that. Yeah, it's horrible. I would imagine that the people that witness that will never be the same.
Yeah, absolutely. It is traumatic. We know this in our field and in other fields. People in the military will come back having seen death happen.
Yeah.
Watching family violence, we know this to be abusive. Online videos. There are 2 online videos of death that I accidentally saw that are burned into my brain, and I don't think it was good.
Yeah.
That those things got burnt into my brain.
See, I intuitively had this feeling when I was a teenager that I would never want to see that, because I remember, and look, I love horror movies. I love watching fake death all the time.
Yeah.
But my friend Ron at the time had gotten a copy of this Faces of Death. Do you remember this?
Oh, yeah.
And who knows how much of that was fake or not. But he's like, oh, you should come over and watch Face of Death. And I was like, no. And I never did, and I never wanted to, because I had this feeling like watching an actual death, it would be something traumatic to me.
Yeah. It can be. Not for everyone, but it can be. I mean, the speculation I would have is that you're watching even a video of George Floyd being murdered in front of you. It is scary because what it tells us is that could happen to us, that could happen to someone I love. That's a police officer, or at the very least, that's another human being. Yeah. And if I can't trust them, police or other humans, what does that mean for me and my life and the people I love? It gets under our skin and makes us extremely afraid, which makes sense. Patron Ina, she says, is it possible to grieve a TV show as if it is a person? I watched this popular cartoon show called Adventure Time, and it ended 7 seasons recently. The 2 main characters had grown old. Oh, spoiler alert, by the way. You might want to skip forward 10 minutes. The 2 main characters had grown old by the end and died, and were reunited in the dead world. Throughout the episode, I had such a strong emotional response to the feelings of the characters, and by the end of it, I was so filled with grief and despair. I can't even watch the original series anymore without thinking about their journey of death, and it's hard for me to view the characters in the same light enough to watch it like I used to. I know this feeling will pass and that it's normal, but I have a habit of becoming really immersed in whatever show I'm watching, and it's hard for me to differentiate myself from the show sometimes. I was wondering if you could talk about this psychological phenomenon, if it even is one. For context, I am neurodivergent. I've noticed that I become intensely invested in TV shows, and I'm just curious about this thing about me and if it's normal or whatever. Berto, what do you think?
Yeah, in general, we were talking about this before about how we are very affected by movies and things like that. So I can say that, for example, there were a couple movies that I watched that the stuff that happened in the movies was so traumatic to the characters, and yet I knew that it was just characters, and yet I could relate to it. As an example, one of the movies was Kramer versus Kramer, and it's Dustin Hoffman and what's her name?
Meryl Streep.
Meryl Streep, yeah. And then they're going through a divorce, and then they have this kid and stuff, and I could relate because my parents got a very ugly divorce when I was a little kid. And so even though I'm watching a movie, it's characters, and I love that movie, but there was a little bit of re-traumatization from watching it. Like I remember, and as an adult, just watching it, being in tears and being like, oh gosh, and feeling so strong to the point where it really almost felt like I knew these people. Like I know that little boy. Like I know these, I guess as a result of me putting myself in that position, and these things can feel really real and really intense. It can stick with you.
Yeah, like the movie Irreversible that we talk about sometimes.
Oh, yes. Oh, my gosh.
French movie that has a scene, particularly in the middle, that is, again, burnt in my brain. I can't unsee that.
Yeah.
I know it's actors, right?
Yep.
It's actors. But there's a scene in which someone is sexually assaulted, by the way.
In a brutal way. And it's just like, oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah, that is extremely disturbing to me. But I think this is a little different than what Patron Ina is talking about, is that the grief, like of watching, I don't know, like The Office or something, and you get to the end and...
you mean like losing those characters because the show's ended?
Well, not only that, but the characters died. Has that ever happened to you where it's a show, it's long lasting, and you're mm-hmm. The Sopranos or something, and then all of a sudden Tony's dead, and you just intensely like feelings of actual despair.
Yeah.
Something, I'm trying to think of a show where I've had that experience with.
Yeah. Well, that's a good question, because shows that you follow intensely over years and then they come to an end.
And then someone dies.
I had that feeling with The Sopranos to a certain extent. No, actually, definitely. And in fact, reality became fiction because the actor Gandolfini died in real life at a very young age.
I think the one thing I can really relate to is Game of Thrones, like when Ned Ned dies and when Rob dies, and I think a lot of people had this, right?
Yeah.
Or when
actually, no, that's another great point, because the whole first season you're becoming really invested in Eddard Stark.
Yeah.
Like you're gonna follow this guy.
And I was reading the books, so imagine.
Oh yeah.
And I didn't know what was going to happen.
Yeah.
So imagine.
Wait, what's the rest of the story about?
Yeah. And then when Rob died, I'm just like, what? And then the Viper, when he dies.
Certainly. Oh gosh, you're right. That's reminding me, because like the Red Wedding, I think all of us collectively, it became such a meme. It's like, you've killed Christmas. You've killed my childhood. Like, what happened?
Yeah, you killed the mom and Rob.
Yeah, like this is not supposed to happen in any show or movie.
Yeah, he was supposed to march south and kill Joffrey, and
this can't. But I will say, I actually the whole Tony Soprano thing, I did go through a period of pseudo depression when Gandolfini died, because it was like, wait, Tony did die then. Like he's dead. Like. Yeah. And it was bizarre. It was like this surreal thing. Like I get that that's a character. I get this is an actor. I get that things are not connected. And yet it felt like that really happened.
Yeah. Right. So Patron Ina, I think what we're saying is it's normal.
Yeah.
You get really invested in a show. That's, I think, why a lot of shows are good. That's what makes a good show from a bad show, is it's compelling, and you get really invested in the characters, and you kind of insert yourself into the story, and it feels real. And when they die, then it's really hard. But you also mentioned that you're neurodivergent. I don't know if you're saying you're on the autism spectrum, but if you are, which I don't know if that's what you're referring to, people with autism, some people with autism can become hyperfixated on certain things. Not everyone, but essentially it's an obsession on a person or people, whether it be fictional people or even someone in your real life. And there are pros and cons to this fixation, of course, is if you're on the autism spectrum and you're prone to becoming fixated, and you become very fixated on Adventure Time, and you're just really into it, and it feels very intense, and you think about it all the time, that means you're really enjoying the show, and you might get in the fandom group, and you're hanging out with other fans, and it's fun to be with other hyper fixated people, and that community. The con is stuff like this, where if they die, it'll hit you like a ton of bricks. It'll hit you like, it was your parents or something,
Oh, actually, you just reminded me of one. Spoiler alert. By now it's late, but when Dumbledore died in the book, because it was like one of these moments, like I'm sitting there, book 6, and he dies, and I'm thinking, where's the trick? Oh, they cast some sort of spell, and he's dead, and he doesn't come back. And then book 7 starts, and he's still dead, and I'm still grieving him, and he never comes back. I mean, he comes back in like a little vision thing, but that was impactful, because I had grown very attached to that series, very attached to that character, and he was a father, grandpa figure, or whatever.
Yeah, it really felt after he died, especially in the way that he died, that this is becoming dark.
Yeah.
This story's becoming dark.
It's legit.
Yeah. Let's take a break, and then after that, more legit questions. What do you say?
Let's do it.
All right, we're back from the break. Let's do some OPPs, Berto. What do you say?
OPP.
So these people became patrons. So this is a long list, Berto.
Oh, really?
Because
we had an influx?
Well, this was the month that I released the attachment deep dive.
Oh.
So a lot of patrons signed up.
Jumped on.
That month.
Wow.
So get ready for usually we will read so these are people that became patrons in a particular month in the past and have stayed patrons this entire time. That's the key. It's like they became patrons, but they stayed. They're loyal.
Loyal patrons.
And usually we'll read 10, 15 people.
Yeah.
This is, it could be, I don't know. It's a lot of people. Okay. So we got Bonnie from God knows where. We have Zoe from God knows where. We have Brooke from Mansfield, Texas. We have Sally from Olympia, Washington. We have Lori from Chapel Hill, North Carolina. We have Tim from Arizona. We have R. Reed from Atlanta. We have Caribou from God knows where. We have Rudy from God knows where. We have Daniel who's an upper tier patron from God knows where. We have Linda from Pasadena, Maryland. Pasadena, Maryland. That's funny.
I didn't know there was a Pasadena in Maryland.
Martina from God knows where. Janice from Las Vegas, Nevada. We got Taylor from Vancouver, Washington.
Wow.
We have Mr. Murderbird from Huntsville, Alabama. We have Lisa from God knows where. We have Priyanka from Manchester, New Hampshire. We have Rebecca from Portland, Oregon. We have Hannah from God knows where. We have Byron from College Station, Texas. Catherine from God knows where. Kelsey from Charlotte, North Carolina. Michael from Pomona, California. Aaron from Wisconsin. Holly from Houston. Marin from God knows where. Emily from London, Great Britain. We have Elizabeth, who I think we've connected with, from Chicago. Nadia from Oslo. You've been there, right?
Yeah.
What, did you like it?
Wait, no, not Oslo. No, I've been to Stockholm.
Oh.
Stockholm.
Gonzalo from Madrid. You been there?
No, I've never been.
We have Joel from Edmonton, California.
I have been to California.
Rachel from St. Louis. You been there?
No.
Tammy from God knows where. Have you been there?
I have been there.
Lauren from Nashville. You been there?
No.
Nashville's nice.
I've not been to 99.9% of the world.
Thor from God knows where. Lola from Chicago. You been to Chicago?
I have been to the airport.
Janet from God knows where, Robin from Vancouver, BC. You been there?
Yes.
What do you think about Vancouver?
Love Vancouver.
Yeah, we have so many memories from there. Sky from Brisbane, Australia. Is that how you say that? Brisbane?
I think it's pronounced Barbie.
We have Aaron from Portland, Oregon. Natasha from Australia. I think we've communicated with Natasha. Fabian from CH. What do you think CH? Country code.
Czechoslovakia.
You think?
CH
country
Poland.
code is Switzerland.
Oh.
What? Zurich. So, anyway. Desponia from God knows where. Jacqueline from West Hills, California. Andrea from God knows where. Lavania from Chicago. Mallory from God knows where. Alexia, Deb, Josie, Johnny, Caitlin, Kaylee, Magdalena from Stockholm.
Wow, that's a lot of stuff. See, I know Stockholm.
Dejana from Bavaria, Germany. Jill from Issaquah, where I grew up. We have Vicky, who is a upper tier patron from Lansing, Michigan. We have Jessica from Seattle.
Nice.
We have Mary from New Jersey, Stuart from Washington, D.C., Melanie from Sedona, Arizona. We have Anastasia from Illinois, Jenna from Texas, Sarah from California, Danny from Quebec, Maya from New Jersey, Helen from Lancashire, Lancashire from Great Britain, Jason from Blackburn, Great Britain, Anya from Oxfordshire from Great Britain. So it's 3 Great Britain.
From Blackburn, Lancashire?
Oh, maybe.
That's in the song.
Dave, Lynette from Seattle, and Lisa from Melbourne, Australia.
Woo! Wow, what an epic list.
Yeah, I mean, all y'all were motivated, I think, by the attachment deep dive in March of 2019, and you've remained patrons this whole time.
That's incredible.
And y'all just made me bore all the listeners with this long-ass list. But thank you for being patrons, first, and two, was sticking with us.
Thank you for being a patron.
Listener Barb says, is it a mental illness to believe conspiracy theories? Anti-vaxxers are paranoid of government and pharmaceutical companies. Religious people believe Hillary Clinton's run a child pornography out of a pizza shop, etc., etc. These people only want to view alternate news sources. Seems delusional. Can you speak to this, Berto? Is it a mental illness?
Obviously, that would be too broad of a categorization. I am imagining that there are definitely people on any number of mental illness spectrums that are in those groups. I would say, I would bet as a layperson that there's probably a higher incidence of certain kinds of mental disabilities or mental issues that end up in those groups. That said, I also know, people even in my own life that fall into those categories. I've also watched many documentaries about people that are flat earthers and other things like that, who would be really hard to say at a glance, at least, oh yeah, that person's clearly, has something clearly wrong with their head, other than the fact that they're subscribing to those notions. But honestly, people are convinced of a lot of things, and humans are not great. Humans don't have genetic code that makes them great detectors of BS and detectors of like logic and things like that.
Another way to put it is the environment we evolved in, over the span of 1 million years, closer to our recent species evolution or emergence. There wasn't the internet, there wasn't government, there wasn't politics, there wasn't science, there wasn't news, there wasn't trying to decide whether or not your activity by driving a car is contributing to the global warming, and what does that even mean? We did not evolve the ability to determine or to evaluate these kinds of things.
Yeah.
Our survival didn't depend on, but our survival did depend on our ability to draw connections between things like, when the sun is higher in the sky, more people start dropping because of, I don't know why that's happening, but people are passing out. maybe those things are connected. We're connectors.
Yep.
When it's raining more, the crops grow. Or when I hear this sound, it means there's more, the herd is over there. And so therefore go kill a thing and eat the herd. We're very good at making connections. And so our evolved brain being not evolved for the complexity of our current information world, but being evolved to make connections creates conspiracy theories.
Yeah, and I think that what is weird is that clearly there is some healthy set of humans that are able to kind of see through the superficial connections that one might make and are able to say, well, actually, maybe there's a better way we can approach this, maybe a more systematic way. Maybe we should try to run experiments and see what works and doesn't work, right? And so over the years, we developed sciences and all these things. And to your point, there didn't used to be an internet. And so the things that people would learn generally were a little bit more manicured. They were well manicured. You'd have to go get the encyclopedia, and that was well edited and, lots of review boards and stuff like that. So to find a book on some random conspiracy is not something you could easily do.
Right.
They probably wouldn't have gotten published. If they did, it was not in every bookstore and things like that.
Yeah, there were gatekeepers.
Nowadays, anyone can publish anything easily.
Yeah.
And if you just get a few followers, now, I don't know, maybe there's something to it.
Yeah. The other thing I'll say, and we've been over this ground before, that there are, research shows this, whenever you find a group of people who are adhering to a conspiracy theory, particularly the vocal people, there is a higher incidence of delusional individuals. And this is something that people forget. People will post pictures or videos on Reddit of look at this Karen doing this and that. And I'll watch the video and I'll be like, that person is obviously
struggling,
schizophrenic. They're having an episode.
Yeah.
They're because they're screaming at you about what's the frequency, Kenneth, or something.
Yeah.
And these people are filming, being and then she starts spouting racist things because she's delusional. And it doesn't make it okay, but I'm just did it ever cross your mind that she might not be on her meds, or she might have had some kind of medical problem? Don't assume everyone is sane, And so along those lines, you'll see someone at a rally waiting for JFK Jr. to show up.
Yeah.
And it's quite possible that half the people in that audience are on a spectrum of schizophrenia.
Yeah.
Because I think people think, well, once you have schizophrenia, you get locked up or you get forced on meds. No, you have freedoms. If you have schizophrenia, you have full-blown delusions. And unless some special circumstances happen, you're just a regular citizen with all the rights and the life of a regular citizen. You have an apartment, you go to the grocery store, you could have a job, and your symptoms might come and go as well. So that's another thing to think about, is that if you're looking at people and you're going, why in the world do you believe that? Having said that, I think sometimes we can go too far with that and think they're all, suffering, when many of them are not diagnosable at all.
Well, and in some
they're
of the
extremely
conspiracies,
misled and or very motivational reasoned.
Right. And in some of the conspiracies, as an example, the flat earth, and I know this because I just watched this couple-hour documentary following some of these people. It was on Netflix. You might have seen it.
No, I didn't.
Okay. It's kind of fascinating.
I think it would be too painful for me to watch.
It doesn't focus too much on well, anyways, it might be.
Because the QAnon, documentary
painful.
on HBO was painful for me to watch, because I'm it just focused so much on the delusion that I'm can we move on? Because yes, I get it. They believe ridiculous things and they read ridiculous things into ridiculous posts. Can we just go to chapter 2? But the whole documentary, was
this documentary, I don't know how you'd feel, but the point wasn't so much, in fact, the people they showed, let me put it that way, the people they showed didn't come off by and large as crazy, unredeemable, psychos or something. No. They were mostly all ex-professionals or professionals, a lot of them independently wealthy, that were, their main flaw was not actually understanding what is scientific experiment means and what proof means in that sense. Because what they would do is they would say, well, look at this. Like, you know, they'll make one of those claims like, well, the ship goes down, and those kind of like casual observations, right? And in fact, in the documentary, when a few subset of them actually tried to conduct an experiment, first, they found out just how hard it is to set up an experiment properly. And second, it didn't confirm their hypothesis. And yet they kept going with the hypothesis, right? So they're not scientists. They don't understand what science means. But they didn't come off as like delusional or psychotic or something like this. That said, there was clearly something about them that was stubbornly trying to adhere almost counterculturally to this narrative.
Right. So I think that it's like being a punk rocker or something. You're just like, look, this is who I am now. And it's my identity, and I'm a flat earther. You know, that's who I am. It fits with so much of who I am. Like I think I'm better than other people. I think I'm smarter than other people. I distrust the government and science and authority. And this provides me a very convenient way to manifest all of my personality traits, you know? Having said that, Berto, you know, I bet you if I watched it, I wouldn't be convinced that they weren't schizophrenic or they weren't delusional. Because you can come across, because, you know, again, there's this idea of like, if you suffer from schizophrenia, that you're just like, obviously, you know, bonkers. But I've talked to people who were in the throes of a delusion, and there is nothing detectable about them until you hear them talk. Okay. I mean, the very first delusional person I talked to, he sat down in my office. He was the father of one of my clients but I'd seen him before, but just me and him this time. And he starts talking, and he's telling me all these stories, and I, you know, I'm just gripped. And he gets to this story about like him and these other guys stole like all these fur coats, and they were being chased by these helicopters, and they made it across the border from Oregon. You know, it was very elaborate. And I'm just like, whoa, this story is like wild. And I'm, you know, I'm believing every word, because why wouldn't I? You know, it's just everything he's just telling me is just, and then all of a sudden he looks out the window and he says, oh, and also see that guy outside? And I look outside, and there's this guy dropping off his kid at the agency. And I didn't recognize him, but it just looked like a dad dropping off his kid, you know, pulling up in a minivan, that kind of thing. And he's like, yeah, see that guy? He's following me. He's part of the FBI. Right. And I look out the window, and I'm like, really? You know? And then like half a second later, I'm like, oh, he's delusional. That's a classic, you know, persecutory delusion. It was possible it was an FBI agent, but
not likely.
But not likely. And so as soon as he said that, and it clicked in my brain, I actually felt physically disoriented, because I suddenly had to rewrite everything he had said to me up until that point. There was nothing about his demeanor that said there was something up.
Yeah.
It was all just in what he believed and what he said. Yeah. So someone could be in that documentary and in the full throes of a schizophrenic, you know, delusional episode, and not exhibit any other ancillary symptoms.
I'd be interested because a couple of them, like the two main characters, is the guy, this gal, and they've been at this for years. They run websites, they run groups and stuff. So you'd have to believe like they're constantly like, you know, but yet.
Right. That's less likely to be a delusion if it's consistent like that.
And when they talk about it, because some of them, I would buy it in an instant, because they say they're like, they're adding so many layers to the narrative about what's at the edge of the world and who is in charge and how does it work, like all these things, right? The fiction is so elaborate, whereas some of them are a little bit, they leave it all very fuzzy, because they mainly just want to make the point that the world is flat. And like there's one of them that I don't even know if he believes it or not, but he makes flat earth, quote unquote, globes, like flat earth models,
flat earth plates, I guess.
But really elaborate, very, like he's clearly an amazing handcraft worksman, and he makes these amazing models, and they buy them and stuff. But I don't even know, like, does he actually believe it? I'm not sure.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but they believe not only that the earth is flat, but there's this massive world
conspiracy.
Right.
Yeah.
So even if you did give them evidence, of which there's evidence abound,
you're part of the conspiracy.
Yeah, they're just part of the conspiracy.
Yeah.
So it's like it's a theory that you can't prove or disprove because there's this all God powerful conspirator group that is, can do anything they want.
Yeah.
It's basically, Going to Discord here to Easy Pod Questions channel. People can submit easy pod questions. Nini wrote in, is it common for some people with abandonment anxiety to overcompensate by pretending someone fell in love with them? Is it common for some people with abandonment? So Berto, you were abandoned when you were young. You might have had some abandonment anxiety when you were a kid and beyond. Did you ever overcompensate by pretending someone fell in love with you?
No. Pretending someone fell in love with me? No.
Like playing a game, like, oh, that person, my teacher is secretly in love with me.
No, I never did. But I mean, I could see it because, there's other things I did to cope. For example, with females, if a female ever didn't show me affection or maybe was mean to me or something, I would cut them off instantly. It was like a defensive thing. Like, okay, well then we're done. Like 0 to 1, 0 to 100.
Did you ever falsely? I know the answer to this question. Actually, I don't know if this exactly fits, but did you ever falsely believe that someone was into you and take action based on that false assumption when it wasn't true?
No, because I was always in the opposite end. Like I was always too slow to realize if someone might be into me, and I was. No,
I'm talking about like at a party, drunk.
Oh, that's different. Sure, yeah, like misreading social cues, thinking that boundaries could be crossed.
Right.
Yes,
definitely. I mean, could that be part of an abandonment compensation? Like.
I attribute,
love me, accept me, take me in.
It could be. I also attribute maybe most of it or part of it to the abuse thing.
Right.
Because the boundaries got so washed out.
Yeah. But it usually was or always was with someone who was in your life. It wasn't just like a random...
But I will point out, and I don't know how much you like this part, because at least 3 of the cases, the other person had also been abused.
Yeah. Right.
And so
and also the ones I can think of that this happened gave signals.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so it never justifies any of this stuff. It's just that it's so confusing when your head has been messed with in such a manner.
Yeah. Jay Spider says, now that the podcast is a bigger part of your life, do you miss having a deeper relationship with clients? It's an interesting question. Yes, I do. In fact, there are times that I'll be talking about certain clients and wish that, because there's so many people out there. So there's actually 2 areas. One is clients who have personality disorders of various kinds and are in various spectra, who I believe aren't being treated well in other therapy. I feel bad. I'm like, it's really hard to find the right therapist. They're out there for sure, and I have this urge to like save all of them and to treat all of them. Like, come to me because, I know what I'm doing, and it's not going to be easy, and it's not going to be a walk in the park for me either, but I know exactly what I'm doing. I know exactly what I'm doing when it comes to, it's like a plumber that looks at a broken sink, they look at it like, I know exactly what to do with that.
Right.
And I also know what I'm getting into. I know that we're going to have transference. I know you're going to hate me. I know you're going to fall in love with me, or you're going to try to get me to reject you. Like, I know that's going to happen. I know I'm going to feel bad during those moments. And it's just like precision.
I've been lined up.
I've been through it, and with other therapists, like, they might not know any of this stuff, and they're gonna fuck it up, as they sometimes do. And not all therapists, of course. Plenty of therapists are better than I am at this, but yeah, I worry. I have that concern sometimes, because I feel bad for people who can't find the right therapist, and many of you will email me just telling me it's hard to find the right one, and I believe you. The other group of people I feel bad about is I shut down my supervision practice, so I no longer mentor students. I stopped teaching the class that I taught for 11 years straight, in which I mentored supervisees. I taught it even long before that. Anyway, for 20 years, I'd been mentoring novice clinicians,
right.
And that's a very important job. Like, there are so many different bumps in the road that supervisees will run into, emotional and professional, and getting clients, and motivation and self-care. Like, I'm their big brother,
right.
walking them through there with them while they're struggling. And, they get a divorce in the middle of their beginning of their practice, and I'm there, talking with them about, their life. And it's a huge relationship.
But at your advanced stage, you can't afford to.
And so with the podcast taking up more part of my life, I excised that part of my life completely. I don't supervise anyone anymore.
Yeah.
I do still have some clients, but not many. And so, I chose to do that because I wanted to do those things. And I still teach, so I'm still in contact with students, and, some of them will just flat out ask me, can you please mentor me? And
right.
I'll say, no, sorry, I don't mentor anyone anymore.
Yeah.
Apparently I'd rather do the podcast and everything that it entails, but I very much do miss that. And but there are things about it I don't miss. Supervising, being a therapist, there's not really much about it that I don't like, but being a supervisor, you have a lot of responsibility. Like, not only am I there for them, but if they screw things up, I got to catch them. And I got to tell them not to do that.
Yeah.
And I have to determine where they're incompetent and catch them before they run into a problem. And I consider that my job.
Sure.
I have to understand the ethics and the laws, and and like HIPAA. I read HIPAA. It's this document that is in just very strange language, but I read it, and I had to do all this other work behind the scenes to like stay up to date on things. I didn't enjoy that, or I kind of did at the time, but eventually I got wary, and although 90% of my mentees are wonderful people, and some of them good friends of mine, some of my mentees were not pleasant to work with, like personality clash, let's just say. But I had to, I was stuck with them, and it's one thing to have a student in a class where I'm teaching and then the class is over. It's another thing to have a mentee who I might be working with for 10 years. You know what I mean? You're kind of locked in.
It's a long commitment.
Yeah. And I would lie awake at night, kind of like hoping that they wouldn't like do something wrong and drag me into court. You know
geez.
Because that would happen. Like I'd be implicated if they screwed something up.
Oh man.
So I don't miss that. Alex L., how different is it to do therapy on individuals with personality disorders than people without it? Well, everyone, Alex, is on a personality disorder spectrum of some sort in all likelihood. So I don't really know how to answer that question precisely, but very briefly, saying what I said before is that it's very countertransference heavy. People with personality disorders tend to produce a lot more feelings in me that are difficult to deal with, and I have to be very on my game. PB Trail Runner says, any thoughts on HBO's In Treatment? Berto, do you remember us doing an episode on it like 10 years ago?
In Treatment? What was that one?
Oh, you don't even remember. So
what was the show?
It was a show with God, what's his name? Irish actor. Anyway, he is a therapist, and every episode is a therapy session, and people come into his home office.
Wait, I did this?
And we did you and I did an episode on it.
Really?
Literally 10 years ago.
In Treatment.
Or 10 years ago, 9 years ago, or maybe 10 years ago.
In Treatment.
What's that guy's name?
Netflix, it says.
Well, it wasn't.
Oh, I see.
It was before Netflix.
HBO series. Okay.
The guy from Miller's Crossing. What's that guy's name? Anyway.
Man.
Do you see it?
I'm looking. I don't remember this at all.
Oh, well, anyway, so you don't have any thoughts. My thoughts are that the show, I didn't, everyone always asks me to watch it. And for some reason, I never could get myself to watch it for entertainment because it was like watching work. And although the therapist in the beginning I thought was fine, a little not my style, but I know eventually he starts having like sex with his clients, just like every other show.
Oh, the main guy is from Usual Suspects as well.
Right.
Yeah. So
I just never watched it because it was not entertaining for me to watch.
Dude, I never watched this show.
Cutie Rain says...
By the way, I've never watched this show.
You did watch one episode because we...
Okay, maybe I watched one episode because I have zero recollection of anything about the show.
Yeah. Any suggestion for an aspiring YouTuber, Berto?
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I would say first and foremost, you're going to have to find a voice. Like, what is it that you're going to talk about? You need just a little bit of setup to start with, but you actually, if you have a nice iPhone or a nice Samsung phone or something, it's got really nice cameras these days, but lighting is important. So I'd say the first top 3 things are: first, have a nice camera, have some good lighting, then have some good audio. And by audio, it's like you get a mic and make sure your room sounds okay. But that's just the superficial stuff. Your video actually could look kind of crappy and the audio could be unideal if you have really good content. Not great to do it that way, and by really good content, that's not something I can tell you what it is. I can tell you what videos I like, and you can find what videos you like. But what I would say is, like, look at the things that you like the most on YouTube and ask yourself, what is it about it that you like?
Right.
And if you could remove all the other elements, if you were only left with one element, what is it? And then see if you can, from there, piece together what is that thing that you could do that would be interesting to someone.
Yeah, this podcast is in a rare echelon of podcasts in that we actually, work for the pod. We make enough money, or I do, to work full time on a podcast. That's pretty rare. Of all the podcasts, it's kind of hard. One of the main factors as to why that happened is because I listen to so many podcasts and always have, well before I even started my own podcast. I've talked about this before, but my phone app keeps track of how many hours I listen to podcasts. And a couple of years ago, it calculated that I listen to 8 hours of podcasts every day on average.
Yeah.
So half of my waking life, I am listening to podcasts. That means like exercising, doing the laundry, driving to the store, even walking around the grocery store. I'm still listening to podcasts, right. And so I am a massive consumer of a lot of different kind of podcasts. And I also, as I was making this podcast over the years, I was always refining it. I would hear something in another podcast, a style or a thing, and I'd say like, ooh, I want to do something like that. And I would do it. And then I would experiment with it and I would listen back to the pod, So when you're making a YouTube, I find a lot of people are like, I want to make a YouTube channel. And I'll be like, well, what channels do you watch? And you're like, oh, I don't know. I'm like, in all likelihood, you're going to make a shitty ass YouTube channel because if you don't actually consume YouTube channels, right, you don't really know the landscape. You're going to create something. It's not likely to be very good. So, as Berto's saying, watch other YouTube channels that you like and try to learn from that. Yeah. The other thing I'll say, and we've given advice before, but something I haven't said before is I would start short at first, like 3 minutes. If you can't condense down your point, unless it's absolutely requires it to be super long, like it's an investigative story of some kind. Sure. But if you're just like, I want to make a video about how to cook or something, I want to do don't do a
2-hour recipe.
Yeah, do 3 minutes, because if it's good, people are much more likely to watch it if it's short and, and brief than if it's long, Plus, longer videos tend to be watched by fans.
Right.
And short videos tend to be watched by the masses.
And you can't get to the fans without some initial
right. Or
masses.
at the very least, put everything that needs to be learned in the first couple minutes, and then if you need to, and it could span later.
Yeah.
There are so many YouTube channels. When I click on them, I'm like, oh, who's this? I'll just check out who these people. And if I'm watching 2-3 minutes in, and that's a long time, and I'm like, where is this headed?
Yeah.
Where are we going?
Especially when the title is why you clicked on it, and they don't get to the title until 20 minutes, 30 minutes later.
Yeah. And honestly, if I get 45 seconds into a video like that, I will, and I didn't get what or at least I didn't get when I was going to get that thing, I will never watch that channel again.
Right.
I will say, because of all the channels on YouTube, I'm like, I'm done with you. I'm done with you. Now, maybe you're great. I don't know, but not for me. Yeah. Like, you've burned me once. Like, I'm not going to do that again. The Vlog Brothers, for instance, they get into it
right away.
The first sentence.
Yeah.
Like, it is sentence 1, blah, blah, blah. They don't mess around. They don't go like, so, there's so many YouTube channels where they start off, they're like, wow, they're like checking in with their audience or something. And I'm just like, what are you doing?
I know.
Like,
the ones that are very puzzling to me are edited versions of a very long thing. Because I get it, if you're doing like a live show every day that's like 3 hours long, but then they edit a clip for YouTube and they still keep a lot of the dead air.
Yeah.
It's like, why?
Yeah. So, but what do I know? Maybe there's some other way of making a wonderful YouTube channel.
Well, I guess the one counterpoint to try if you want to, especially if you're, anyways, if you have some really creative ideas and maybe you haven't even seen a lot of videos or whatever, try the TikTok type of format or the YouTube shorts. It's such a low hanging, the stakes are low.
Yeah.
You just make little videos, see if something sticks. And at the very least, it'll get you moving the muscles. It'll get you putting content out. And who cares? And by the way, make a throwaway channel to start with, just to like practice. But when you actually have a specific idea, like, okay, I think I know what I want to do, then get very, get the meticulous aspect of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's all these tricks that, like, back in the day, when our YouTube channel wasn't very popular. I mean, we would get like 1,000 views every episode, which is, quite a bit when you think about it. But on YouTube's standards, it's like basically 0. That, occasionally we would look into how to increase SEO and click rates and stuff. And there's all these tips you'll see on YouTube, like how to get more clicks, how to get more, and there's certain things that you have to follow, like your title and you have to have certain tags, and you have to involve certain keywords in the description. As someone who never did any of that, when I started making 90 Day Fiancé reaction videos, my numbers completely took off.
Yeah.
They went from 500 to 1,000 on a video to almost 1 million on one of my videos. You know what I mean? And so, and I didn't do any of those tricks.
Yeah.
What I did is I created content that people wanted to watch.
Yeah.
And because, when you watch these tips, none of them say,
create content that people want to watch.
Maybe your content sucks. Maybe you have low numbers because
Right.
your content isn't, I wouldn't say our content was bad. It just wasn't geared towards YouTube. It was us talking for 2 hours.
That's right.
With no visuals. And so you need to create content that is compelling, that people want to watch. And so that's a hard thing to do. And if we had advice on that, we'd be billionaires. Oliver asked a question. Any update on YouTube or on Discord? Any updates on when there's going to be a schizoid or schizotypal deep dive? Soon. My life has been I moved recently, and it was and still is a very stressful move. I could go into details about things. Just to highlight, one of the stresses of moving was our address is new, so we're not registered with places. And this is something I didn't know was a thing, but like I had to trick some utility companies into believing I lived at a different address so we could get our utilities.
Oh my God.
So imagine trying to trick like the cable company or the water,
PSE and stuff.
Trying to, when they show up to the house, I'm trying to convince them this is a different address.
Yeah.
And all the while worrying if they figure out that I'm tricking them,
right,
they'll turn off all my utilities, and I'll never be able to get them. You know what I mean? So that's just, lying awake at night, like worrying about all of our utilities being shut off, electricity, water, internet. That's just like 10% of the stress that I've been over the past. So when that gets ironed out, which I feel like maybe January will be when I can finally kind of kick back and have some free time. I want to do a whole slew of deep dives, including the schizoid and schizotype. Laura asks, are there any plans for a Berto Bob Kirk crossover episode? Ooh. Are there any that I have missed? What do you think, Berto?
Oh, we did one a while ago, like a long time ago.
Yeah. So, people who listen to the podcast are like, sometimes it's Bob, sometimes it's Berto, sometimes it's Rebecca, sometimes it's just me. What I learned, so back in the day, I used to always want two co-hosts. Right. Originally it was you and Lita.
Yep.
And then for a while it was you and Mandy. Mm-hmm. So I always had this format of it's me and then you and someone else. And usually it was like, I want that other person to always be, Lita had but she moved.
Right.
Mandy had work stuff so she couldn't do the podcast anymore. Paulette was only kind of halfway into it to begin with. Jody moved out of town.
Yeah, we tried a few others in the middle of that.
Yeah. And so I always had that model, and there have been times in the recent years where I've had two co-hosts on the podcast. But what I find is that two is so much easier to manage. Mm-hmm. When there's three people, things get out of control real fast. And if it's a fun episode, then it's great. But if it's like a meaty topic, if it's you and someone else, I find that the conversation can easily go off the rails. Like as a simple visual, it's like I'm driving the bus and occasionally I go, I take my hands off the wheel and you're in the passenger seat and you just kind of grab the wheel and turn it. But then I'm sitting in the driver's seat.
Right.
And then I quickly can grab the wheel and get us back on track. If there's two people, the analogy is I'm driving and then I take my hands off the wheel and then the third person sits in my seat and I go in the back seat and I can't get back to the wheel because there's two people up in the front of the bus. You know what I mean?
And what if it's not even a bus, but it's like an elephant?
Yeah.
And then we're not even driving. We're like in a safari.
Yeah.
And then we get attacked by monkeys.
Are you the monkey?
This is an example of the bus going off the...
Oh, I get it. So having a Berto Bob both on at the same time, and also Berto and Bob are very different co-hosts who bring very different energy to it. And when I've experimented with that in the past, it didn't go well. It didn't go terribly, but it's not a chemistry that works well. And so
Lita and I and Mandy and I were good, especially because at the time we did a lot of fun episodes and it was
we just good chemistry,
improv and laugh and
you and Lita and Jody. And
Jody, we did a lot of in situ episodes where we would go to places and
you had great chemistry and we had a format and everything. But Bob, he kind of turtles when it's chaotic on the podcast. He sort of pulls himself way back.
So you need a pace and a quiet. I get it.
Like there was that time when we had him on the 1000th show.
Right.
Him and Drain and you. and we did that hot sauce thing.
Oh yes.
It was kind of a chaotic mess, and and Bob, like, I could just see him shutting down during the last question, Berto. Maria says, what are your thoughts on bibliotherapy? Berto.
Bibliotherapy, like therapy with books?
Yeah.
Where you like, oh, it's interesting. Oh yeah, I could totally see this. You read a book, the book, it's like a book club. When you're reading a book in a book club, you have all these thoughts about the characters and what it means to you and all these things. Especially if it's a book dealing with, it could be dealing with trauma or similar things. I could totally see that. You read a book, maybe you even pick a book that is in a related area, and maybe it doesn't even have to be the whole book. You could read a chapter or something like that. It might be hard with a fiction book because you'd be lost, but I could see it being very valuable, actually, because I know that when I haven't been in many book clubs, but in my brief experiences, I find it. Oh, actually, you know what? When you and I do episodes where we're going over a movie, for example, or a show, and maybe I've read the book, there's always some therapy opportunities there because we're always talking about how this character felt with this relation, this dysfunctional thing. And then a lot of times I'm like, oh yeah, well, I can relate to that because of this, that, and the other thing.
Right.
So I could see it.
Yeah. I've never formally used bibliotherapy, but yeah, I'm all for it. It would require me to do some prep that I'm not fond of in that area. But yeah, I've seen it used to good effect in the way that Berto was talking about. All right. Well, that was a fun Berto, for the most part, fun, but all Berto questions episode. Final word, Berto.
You know what? I'm going to read a book because it's been a while. And the book I think I'm going to read, because I just listened to Dune on tape. Well, not tape, but I think the book I'm going to read has to be fiction, maybe a little mystery. So do you have any recommendations for me?
Mystery?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not the right person to answer.
We should ask people to send us their recommendations.
Oh, okay. Well, how can they contact
Discord.
you? How can they contact you
Discord.
directly? Okay.
Berto AMA.
Go to the Berto AMA on Discord.
Yeah.
And suggest
books I should read that are, I like, fiction and mystery.
And tag Berto in it.
Yeah.
Berto's tag is just Berto.
Yeah.
All right, everyone out there, please take care of yourself because
you deserve it.